TV, on radio and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 10.
Good morning, I'm Nadira Tudor. The Port of Dover says it's currently taking around 60 minutes to clear security checks for travel to France. Traffic levels appear to be back to normal after 2 days of severe delays on surrounding roads, with queues of up to 7 hours yesterday. The government's blaming French authorities for understaffing the checkpoints. Travel expert Simon Calder says the extra border checks now needed due to Brexit are slowing things down.
Once the deal was negotiated, we said we want to be third country citizens, therefore we want an external EU border, and we want to have all our passport stamps. And the rough estimate is that it takes about 3 times longer to process a carload of people.
Ukraine's president has accused Russia of barbarism. It's after a missile attack on the port of Odessa following a landmark deal to resume grain exports from Ukraine on Friday. People's Deputy of Ukraine, Alexei Honcharenko, says it proves Russia could not be trusted to stick with the deal.
People are concerned, and in general, like Putin showed again to the whole world that she is not going to respect any agreements, anything, and he doesn't understand any language except of language of force.
The World Health Organization has declared monkeypox a global health emergency, the highest alert that can be issued. However, health officials in the UK are urging people not to panic. There are now around 16,000 cases reported worldwide. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have vowed to toughen controls on migration into the UK as part of their bids to become next Tory leader and Prime Minister. Despite the former Chancellor previously having raised concerns about the Rwanda policy, he now claims he'll do whatever it takes to make it work in a bid to tackle illegal immigration. The Foreign Secretary says she'll increase the number of Border Force staff. Meanwhile, the most senior minister in the Cabinet Office has warned that HS2 is one of the projects that could spell trouble. The Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Kit Malthouse, told The Telegraph that it was akin to a killer whale that could rip the arm off the next Prime Minister. A state of emergency has been declared in a part of California as a wildfire continues to rapidly spread near Yosemite National Park. The Oak Fire, as it's been named, has continued to grow in size since starting on Friday. More than 6,000 people have been evacuated and 10 homes destroyed. And Margot Robbie has been confirmed as one of the former stars returning to Neighbours for the show's last ever episode. After 37 years on screen, the soap will come to a close with a double episode special on July the 29th, and we'll also see the return of Kylie Minogue and Jason Donovan. Now time for today's weather.
The Sunday Times Wine Club sponsors Talk TV weather.
It's a mixed weather picture this morning, rather breezy with outbreaks of rain across the north and the west, whilst the southeast in particular will remain dry and sunny. Taking a look at the midday snapshot, and much of Scotland will be largely cloudy with showery rain in places. Some brighter breaks are possible, especially for parts of the Caithness and Sutherland, as well as Aberdeenshire. A Met Office warning has been issued for Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland due to heavy and thundery showers through the afternoon and evening. Parts of Wales, the West Midlands and into Yorkshire will also see some rain at times, though the East Midlands and East Anglia should be dry and sunny. In southern England, it will be mostly dry with the best of the sunshine in the southeast into the evening, and it will remain unsettled across the north and west of the UK, but staying sunny in the southeast.
The Sunday Times Wine Club sponsors Talk TV weather.
The Sunday Night Club is your club. I'll take you inside the dressing room, from the terraces to the boardroom, to ask the questions you want answered. There is no membership required for the Sunday Night Club from 7.
And a very good morning to one and all on this glorious, glorious Sunday morning, the 24th of July. Look outside the window from the 17th floor of Talk Towers Goodness me, there's not a cloud in the sky, and perhaps there's not a cloud in the sky in terms of the Tory leadership debate, because that's one of the things we're going to be focusing on in the first hour of my show. There is lots going on, there's lots of debate, and both candidates are, of course, putting forward their new ideas, their great ideas. But do you trust them? Do you think they'll actually deliver? That really is one of the big questions I'll be looking at. And then, of course, we need to move on to some of the other huge issues of the day. In the second hour of my show, I'm going to be talking about security, law and order, and the big one, yes, immigration. What will these two candidates do about illegal immigration with the crossings across the channel, their views on the Rwanda policy, and much, much more. These are another vital issues that any Prime Minister need to tackle. And in the third hour, as you know, I like to look at the truth behind the great climate debate, what I call climate sanity. Yes, we'll be having a vital discussion on the madness of some of the net zero objectives, some better ways to do things properly. And yes, we need to be looking at my game board, my leadership snakes and ladders. Of course, there are just two left on it. Who's going up the ladder? Who's going down, sliding down the snake? That's what I want your views on. That's the big question. We've got some great guests, but in reality, the show works best of all if you give me a call, 0344 499 1000, or text us 87222 using the word talk, or tweet us at TalkTV. I'll try and get through as many messages. Keep them clean. It's supposed to be a family show on a Sunday morning. And you're listening to, of course, Talk TV, and this, for the next 3 hours, will be Tice Talk. And with Tice Talk at the beginning of my show, of course, is that music, which means it's time for my sermon. Yes, the Sunday sermon every Sunday morning, and the big question in the leadership debate. Do you remember the great William Shakespeare, one of our finest Englishmen? He posed the question in his great work, Hamlet, to be or not to be. Well, I'm thinking we should adapt that, because the big question at the moment seems to be to tax or not to tax. That is the huge difference, the fundamental difference between the two leadership candidates. Camp Rishi, they want to tax and spend. The con-socialist ex-chancellor seems to be able to spend your money better than you can. Whereas Camp Lizzie, she wants to cut taxes and grow. Who's right? Who's wrong? Who's going to spend money better? Rishi's worried about your credit card. Really? You know, I think that there's a serious continuation under Camp Rishi where he's not actually a conservative. No. He's a con-socialist. He wants to tax more and spend more. There's no talk anywhere of reforming anything. There's no talk of cutting wasteful government spending that we all see everywhere. And lucky Lizzie, well, she talks about cutting taxes, but I would argue she's not focusing on the areas where you need to cut taxes fastest, most urgently, which are consumer taxes, because that would automatically, mathematically, reduce inflation. If you cut taxes on consumer goods, the price of the good goes down, and therefore inflation goes down. It's a mathematical fact. She's focusing on cutting business taxes, but if you cut consumer taxes, you'll help with the cost of living crisis. And my concern is that neither of them are talking about any real measures to solve the cost of living crisis. And when we talk about tax cuts, there are many who seem to question what I think is a basic economic fact, totally backed up by the evidence. Because we've got here in the UK, we've got the highest taxes for some 70 years. It's over 35% of the size of our economy is now taxed. Over 35%. In fact, it's about 36% and rising. And yet you look at the US, for example, their total tax take is about 26%, 27%. Is it a coincidence that they consistently have higher growth? Let's look at Singapore. their tax rate is extraordinary, below 20%, and their growth rate consistently higher than the UK. Let's look at our friends down in Australia. Their tax take as a percentage of the size of their economy, it's about 28%, consistently. And guess what? Their growth rate is consistently higher. So much so that if we'd grown our economy at the same rate as the Australians have in the last 15 years, every single year, our tax revenues would be around about £150 billion more. Just imagine, if every single year I gave you another NHS, not the existing one, but an additional one. That's the sort of quantity we're talking about. That's the benefit of growth. The more growth you get, then as a direct consequence, you get more tax revenues over the medium term. And I think it's absolutely vital. Again, look back at the evidence. In the 1950s, when taxes were being cut, growth went up. In the 1980s, Mrs. Thatcher cut taxes, and yes, guess what? Growth went up. But in the last decade, under supposedly a conservative low-tax philosophy, taxes have gone up and growth has gone down. And so the Rishi camp, they're focusing on what they say is, oh yes, but last year we had the highest growth in the G7. Well, there's a reason for that, because the previous year, in 2020, we had the greatest fall in growth because we had such a heavy lockdown. Those of us who are sensible, we're focusing on what's going to happen next year, not what happened last year. And at the moment, the forecast for next year is that we're going to have the lowest growth, I think, in the G20, except Russia. Brilliant. Great. That's something to look forward to, isn't it? I mean, unbelievable. Now, let's remember also that Rishi's worrying about debt. He keeps saying, we've got a debt problem. We haven't, Rishi. We've got a growth problem. There isn't any. And you've been the Chancellor. Let's remember, 45% of the national debt is actually sitting on the Bank of England computer. It's not external debt. I've been saying for 12 months. We should reallocate all of that into a 75-year, call it a Corona war-like bond, fix the interest rate, you can fix it at 1%, and you've dealt with it, right? We don't need to worry about it anymore. The reality is, we've actually had, at times of emergency and war, much higher debt levels than this. For 30 years between the two world wars, we had debt at least 50% higher than now. But when growth came back, when they cut taxes after the Second World War, the economy grew, and therefore the debt, as a percentage of the size of the economy, reduced. And the government's balance sheet is strong. I keep saying, we've got £1 trillion worth. £1 trillion! I know it's impossible to imagine what that is. It's almost half our national debt. £1 trillion of treasure under our feet. It's called shale gas, and there's no debate about that amongst these two leadership candidates. So I want you, any of you, if you're Conservative members, get in touch with your MPs. What's their view on shale gas? The Business Secretary, Mr. Kwarteng, he's sitting on a report that he won't publish on shale gas. No one is talking about the biggest opportunity to ease the national finances. Now again, Rishi always talks, he sounds very credible, doesn't he? He says, we don't want to load up the credit card, borrowing. Well, I think that actually shows how little he understands about businesses, small, medium and large. Because we all know, businesses don't borrow using a credit card. They borrow using medium and long-term debt. That's what they do, Rishi, because that's what makes a company grow. You borrow to invest, to grow, and you grow over the medium term, and that's how you reduce and pay off your borrowings. You don't use a credit card and worrying about paying it off next month in order to invest in the long-term growth of your business. Well, if you do, you need to get some other borrowing methods. That is my clear experience. And therefore, the same is true with sovereign nations. Sovereign nations borrow over the long term, using fixed rates. That's what you should do. But of course, our Treasury, foolishly, about a quarter of our national debt, they linked to the rate of inflation. You couldn't make it up, could you? They linked a quarter of our borrowing to the rate of inflation, so our borrowing cost has gone up. That is foolish, but it's still not too late to change it. And yet no one is talking about these basic things. And I just have a simple motto. I'm absolutely convinced that everyone listening and watching, and all your friends and family, anybody else you know, you're all capable. We all spend £1 in our pocket and get more value, more wisely, than a civil servant spending it on your behalf. It's a fact of life, folks. Higher taxes means lower growth. And I think Camp Rishi need to learn that basic lesson. And that, this morning, is my Sunday sermon. Well, there we are. That's my Sunday sermon. That's my view. But give us a call. You may think I'm wrong. You might think I'm economically illiterate. The number's 0344 499 1000, or send us a text or a tweet. We've got one already coming in. Like Shakespeare, this is theatre. Players playing their parts, a mass distraction. The public is being played. Who knows? I want your views, your thoughts on this. Coming up after the break, we're going to be talking to one of the most experienced, wisest economists in the land. Yes, Gerard Lyons, Chief Economic Strategist at NetWealth, a former advisor to Boris Johnson when he was Mayor of London. He knows a thing or two. We'll ask him what he thinks about taxes, the levels, and whether or not it adds to growth or whether it doesn't make a difference. Maybe he thinks that I'm wrong. We'll find out which view, which camp he's in. He might be sitting on the fence. Who knows? That is absolutely crucial. We've already got a message in here from Mark who says, Richard, raise the tax threshold to 20 to 25,000 to get people off benefits. That's right. I've been talking about this. We must do it. We've got to incentivise and encourage work. Work always pays. Give us a call. You know the number. Stay with us. We'll be coming back to talk to Gerard straight after the break. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends. We've had messages pouring in to me on Tice Talk this morning. Lots of tweets. I'll be getting to them later. We'll be talking about policing in the second hour. We'll also be talking about travel in the third hour. So don't worry. We will come on to all those issues. But at the moment, we need to keep talking about the big issue that seems to divide the two leadership candidates. The question of tax and taxation strategy. Who's right? Who's wrong? Should we tax more? Does it impact on growth? Or what? Rishi seems to be worrying about the credit card. I'm worried about growth. What are you worried about? I'm delighted to be joined now by the Chief Economic Strategist at NetWealth. In my view, one of the finest economic brains the nation is lucky enough to have. Gerard Lyons, thank you for sparing some time this Sunday morning when you could be out sunbathing in this glorious weather. So, Gerard, we've got this extraordinary debate has gone on this week between the two candidates. Rishi Sunak clearly saying that he thinks cutting taxes at the moment is unaffordable. He sort of says he'd like to at some point in the future, whereas Liz Truss is saying we should be cutting in particular business taxes now, and that actually it is affordable. Who's right and who's wrong?
Well, good morning, Richard. It's great to be on the show. In terms of the two candidates, I think Liz Truss is on the right tracks about the need for tax cuts. I heard your Sunday sermon earlier. I think you were right then when you talked about the need for a pro-growth economic strategy. I think that's what's been missing, not just in terms of this leadership debate, but more generally. I think tax policy needs to be seen within the context of that overall pro-growth strategy. So of the two candidates, I think that Liz Truss is right to talk about the case for tax cuts. I haven't seen the granularity of all her proposals. I can't suggest that I agree with everything she says, but I certainly think that tax cuts are affordable, they're not inflationary, and also they're necessary.
And this is one of the big things, isn't it? Because Rishi Sunak is saying actually that they are inflationary. And, you know, I talk about this, and I talk about, well, it's a mathematical fact, surely. If you cut tax, for example, VAT on consumer goods, on fuel, on energy, then that drives the price down, so that must mean the price goes down. Why do they say it's inflationary? Yeah,
well, there's two aspects there. One is the minutiae, as I would say, in terms of where the tax changes should be. But first, far more importantly, is one needs to look at it in the context of what's actually impacting the economy. Currently, the UK faces two economic challenges. One is higher inflation, and the second is an economic slowdown driven by weaker domestic demand. Now, if the economy was seeing inflation driven by domestic overheating because consumers are out spending as if though there's no tomorrow, then tax cuts will probably not be necessary. But the inflation we're seeing has been triggered both by supply-side problems and also by lax monetary policy. Therefore, what we need is tighter monetary policy to address inflation, and at the same time, to address the weaker domestic demand, there's scope for tax cuts. But the reason why Rishi and others are saying that tax cuts are inflationary is because they haven't, in my mind, focused on what's actually triggering the inflation problem we're currently seeing.
So you've really got to dig into the detail. And when you say tighter monetary policy, you mean by that higher interest rates, I think?
Yeah, well, I mean two things. One is not only higher interest rates, but also quantitative tightening by the Bank of England.
What does that mean? What does that mean in layman's language?
Yeah, I was going to say last year what we saw in the UK was the Bank of England printed money by quantitative easing. They added a phenomenal £450 billion to their balance sheet. They basically pressed the button and created money. Now, they did that exactly in that amount because basically the Treasury asked them to, and it coincided with the increase in government borrowing. Now, that added liquidity to the system, that fed the inflation problem. To actually start to move ourselves back to a more stable environment, the Bank of England needs to raise interest rates, and it needs to also reverse that quantitative easing. The thing is, they need to do it in a way in which they're very sensitive to the economy. They can't do it in terms of just putting things on autopilot. So even though last year they could have tightened and the economy would have coped, this year they need to be more careful because the economy is very vulnerable, property prices are already very high. But while they're doing that, I think one vital thing that needs to be stressed in this current debate, Richard, is that the other day people were saying, well, if Liz Truss's tax cuts go ahead, or indeed if any tax cuts go ahead, interest rates will have to go higher. I think it's important to stress that tax cuts and higher interest rates are not opposite ends of the same seesaw.
Right.
They're addressing different problems, different issues. By that I mean, it doesn't mean that if taxes go down, interest rates have to go up by more. Interest rates will have to go up at their own speed, at the Bank of England's pace, to curb inflation.
But you could say, you could say just on that, Gerard, that if you're putting more money back into the economy by giving tax cuts, then if interest rates go up, that takes money out of the economy. So it's not obligatory, but it is one way of dealing with people's inflation concern.
Yeah, well, there are two different issues here, the weaker domestic demand and the higher inflation. But coming back to an earlier point you made, and it was about where the tax cuts could be made.
Yes.
If they're timely and targeted, that they make sense. I think we need to see two types of tax cuts. One is the ones you alluded to about cutting taxes on fuel and on duty, etc. For instance, one could almost halve VAT on fuel, knock 15, 16p off at the pump, and that's effectively giving back to people the windfall gain the Treasury has seen from higher petrol prices, higher duties, higher VAT over the last year. So in some respects, that's just returning to people what's already been taken over the last year. And in likewise terms, to help the squeezed middle, people have been pulled through higher inflation and higher wages in some respects into higher tax brackets. It's called fiscal drag. Back in the old days, automatically taxes would have, or tax allowances would have increased in line with inflation, so people would not have been caught out that way. And Rishi has talked about the morality of tax changes. 20, 30 years ago, you would have argued it was immoral to catch people out by fiscal drag. So that's the other issue that can be addressed here.
Completely. Of course, that affects the least well off, the lowest paid the most. And my concern is that Rishi and his camp completely understand. Just finally, neither of them really, Gerard, are talking about cutting the huge growth, the splurge of government spending. Surely they should be cutting government spending to take money out of the economy.
Yeah, well, basically you can't do everything at the same time.
Oh, I like to.
Yeah. In fact, there will be pressures on whoever wins to actually go the other way this autumn, because public spending in real terms has been eroded by inflation. And already the pressure is there, particularly in terms of education and health, to raise the spending levels to take account of the higher inflation. Certainly what one needs to see, and one saw it last week with the pay review bodies, is to accept higher wages in some of these areas. But certainly, coming back to your point, after the next election, probably in 2024, there's a need to actually look at the pro-growth strategy. Ideally, we should do it before, but we probably won't. And to actually, within that context, have a policy to reduce debt to GDP over time and have a public sector reform linked to public sector pay. You need public sector spending. So you need first-class public services, but they need to be affordable.
Exactly. Gerard, you're so right. I think we've got to cut out the wasteful spending, get productivity, get an improvement in performance. Gerard, thank you so much indeed for that clarity, for that absolutely expert, wise advice. And Gerard clearly is of the view that Camp Lizzie is right and Camp Rishi is wrong. Lots of messages coming in along the same lines. One says here, I wouldn't trust Sunak to run a piggy bank, never mind this great country of ours, and is for Truss. But I think we've got to focus on growth and we've got to cut out wasteful government spending. But give us a call, 0344 499 1000, with what you think. You are listening to the home of common sense. It's Tice Talk. It is, of course, Talk TV.
What was my biggest career moment? After spending about 25 years on Fleet Street, there's loads of stories I could tell you. But actually, I think I did an overnight show for Talk Radio in the early days, the night of the Brexit referendum. And that was actually quite a milestone because, of course, we started off thinking that Remain had won. And at 2:30, 2:45, after Nigel Farage had already said he'd lost, it turned out he hadn't lost. And it turned out we were leaving the European Union. So that was quite a shocker.
This is Talk TV News.
Good morning, I'm Nadira Tudor. The Port of Dover says it's currently taking around 60 minutes to clear security checks for travel to France. Traffic levels appear to be back to normal after 2 days of severe delays on surrounding roads, with queues of up to 7 hours yesterday. The government's blaming French authorities for understaffing the checkpoints. Travel expert Simon Calder says the extra border checks now needed due to Brexit are slowing things down.
Once the deal was negotiated, we said we want to be third country citizens, therefore we want an external EU border, and we want to have all our passport stamps. And the rough estimate is that it takes about 3 times longer to process a carload of people.
The World Health Organization has declared monkeypox a global health emergency, the highest alert that can be issued. However, health officials in the UK are urging people not to panic. There are around 16,000 cases now reported worldwide. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have vowed to toughen controls on migration into the UK as parts of their bids to become next Tory leader and Prime Minister. Despite the former Chancellor previously having raised concerns about the Rwanda policy, he now claims he'll do whatever it takes to make it work in a bid to tackle illegal immigration. The Foreign Secretary says she'll extend the UK's Rwanda asylum plan and increase the number of Border Force staff. And a state of emergency has been declared in parts of California as a wildfire continues to rapidly spread near Yosemite National Park. The Oak Fire, as it's been named, has continued to grow in size since starting on Friday. More than 6,000 people have been evacuated and 10 homes destroyed. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk this Sunday morning. We are talking about the leadership debate, about the big discussion, the fundamental differences about tax policy, to tax or not to tax. That is the question. That's a sort of Shakespearean-like question that we were talking about with Gerard Lyons there. And later this hour, I have got an MP who's supporting Liz Truss. Marcus Longy is coming on. But if any of you know a Tory MP who's supporting Rishi Sunak, could you give him a call and ask him why they won't come on my show? Yes, we've asked about between 10 and 12 Tory MPs if they'll come on the show, but funny, isn't it? They all seem to be rather busy. Maybe they're on the sun lounger or whatever, or in the garden, or is it just a case of cowardice? Because they know that Rishi is in the wrong track with his tax policy. I want them to come on the show. There's still plenty of space. I will make space. But meanwhile, we've got loads of messages, and I have to say, there's more support for Liz Truss than there is for Sunak. In fact, there's no support for Sunak whatsoever. We'll come to those in a minute, because we're going to go down to Dorset, where there's another Liz on the line. Morning, Liz.
Hello, Richard.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm very well, and I just love your programme.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, how are you feeling about this? Are you focused on this leadership debate, or with 6 weeks to go, are you bored already?
I'm very focused on it, but I'm very bored already. I mean, unfortunately, I don't have a vote.
Right.
I was a member of the Conservative Party, but I did not renew my membership because I just despair over what they're doing. But I am very interested in it, and I would really like you to get a Sunak supporter on, because Sunak says there will be no tax reductions until inflation goes down. But he never explains how he is going to get inflation down. I mean, is he just going to leave things to go on as they are?
You're so right. You really have hit the nail on the head. He keeps saying we're getting inflation down, but how's he going to do that?
Yeah, I mean, and until he does, I mean, I quite agree, inflation has to go down, but he has no plans to whatsoever. I mean, I agree with Liz Truss. We do need those consumer taxes down, especially the fuel and the fuel duty, because that will make everything cheaper.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it just drives me insane. I mean, his only plans at the moment, as far as I can see, is tinker around the edges, give help, targeted help, to those people on benefits, and yes, I understand that. However, he's going to miss out on a lot of people who aren't on benefits, and I do know people who are not on benefits, and they struggle. But they're not going to get any of this targeted help. And so the only way to do this, to help everybody, is raise the tax threshold to amount of money where those who need the help and who are working actually get a benefit from it.
You're so right, Liz. My plan is very clear. You should raise the tax threshold from about £12,500 up to £20,000. That's an extra, give or take, 1,500 quid. That's about 30 quid a week. That's real money to those on the lowest incomes. And you've got to incentivise people, Liz, back into work. There's over 5 million people on out-of-work benefits.
I know. And those people will realise they've been helped, whereas giving these sort of £400 here and £300 there, people don't notice that because they go and spend it. I mean, there was an article on Mike Graham's show, I think, whereby someone was listening in the supermarket to a couple of youngsters, I don't know how, but they'd suddenly got these benefits and they were just going to splurge it on alcohol. Now, I mean, seriously.
It's just horrific, and you've got to encourage people to work. People are trapped in the benefit system, and they're just, in far too many cases, there isn't the incentive to work.
No, I know.
It's not good, but it should change, and I just don't understand why they're so slow to make these changes. Liz, great call. Thank you so much for your thoughts, your views. That was Liz in Dorset. She used to be a Conservative Party member. But I think, like most people, yes, we're sort of, on one sense, bored of the debate, but it is really, really important. We're going to head from Dorset way up to Northumberland, wonderful county, where Marion is on the line. Hi, Marion.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It is so beautiful up here.
I can imagine. I'm very jealous.
Oh, you should be.
What's on your mind, Marion?
Stop you coming here. Well, what's on my mind is this. Despite the fact I used to be a UKIP member, I'm now accepting the fact that we are responsible for the mass immigration arriving on our shores. It would save us billions if in the future we stopped our complicity with the United States in bombing highly civilized cultures into the Dark Ages, which spawns mass immigration. We are to blame, and I don't think any minister at this time can stop it.
Well, so what are you thinking? Are you thinking particularly in respect of Ukraine, or were you thinking of somewhere else?
Ukraine's got nothing to do with it. I'm talking about Iraq, Afghanistan and Libya. These were highly civilized cultures. They gave jobs to millions of people.
So is the Taliban civilized, Marion, with regard to not allowing women to work or to go to school? Is that civilized?
That's a sort of like that's something of their culture. It's got nothing to do with what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya used to be highly civilized cultures that we have bombed, being complicit with the US into the Dark Ages. We have to accept that fact.
I think in a sense, I think, Marion, in a sense, I think we do accept that Iraq, going into the Iraq War, was disastrous, and likewise Libya. I'm amazed that David Cameron got let off so lightly politically for going into Libya. But the reality is that I think that is different to the mass migration. I mean, that's just a question of we've got people, you got people smugglers earning huge profits by deliberately encouraging these migrants to come across the channel, when actually France is already a safe country. And if you process them quickly and work out genuine asylum seekers and those that are economic migrants, then that's how you should deal with it, shouldn't you?
Nope. I think we opened Pandora's box when we went into Iraq and now in Libya.
But okay, even if we did, Marion, the consequences of that are that we've got to deal with it now, and we should deal with it properly and promptly and quickly.
But
would we agree on that?
No, what you have just said comes from us bombing these countries.
Even if that's right, and I don't fully accept that, then but we are where we are. Do you accept we should be? Do you accept that we should be dealing with it promptly and swiftly and efficiently?
I think that we should accept responsibility and look into this. It would save us billions if we'd stop being complicit with the US.
But it would save us billions if we stopped the migration across the channel, wouldn't it? I mean, that's the quickest way to save billions.
But it wouldn't. But the fact is, this stems from what I've said we've just done.
Wherever it stems from, the reality is we need to stop the billions. I mean, Marion, I've got to go to a break in a minute. I take your point that, going into Libya, for example, was a disastrous policy. But the point is we are where we are. and we've got to stop the illegal migration. Marion, thank you so much. That was Marion from the glorious county of Northumberland. She's looking at the causes of what's causing mass migration. I agree with her that going into Libya was disastrous, but we've got to deal with the consequences of the illegal migration at the moment. France is a safe country. We should be promptly processing them in France. That is the best, and if not, then you've got to try other policies that may stop stem the tide of it. Anyway, give us a call, 0344 499 1000, with your views, your thoughts. We will be coming to Marco Longhi, MP for Dudley North, after the break. But we've just got time to go to Guildford, where Sam's patiently on the line. Hi, Sam.
Hello.
How are you doing? What would you like to say just quickly before I go to the break?
Thank you. I'm pretty good. I'm really loving your show, and I'm really happy that you brought out the situation of the growth problem that we have in the UK.
Great.
It's really true.
And are you a Conservative member? Do you have a vote in this great debate?
No, definitely not.
Definitely not.
Definitely not.
But do you agree that growth is what we should? You agree that's what we should be focusing on? That's what they've got to.
A country that doesn't produce anything. So now we see we have the problem of just high taxation on people, on poor people, and
that's
to
right.
fix the problem of a country. It's just totally mad. I'm not an educated person from a university or anything like that, but it just makes sense. It just makes basic sense.
Sam, you are talking basic common sense, and that is what matters. Thank you so much for that call. That was Sam from Guildford, and Sam is focusing on growth. I'm focusing on growth. That is how we deal with the challenges we've got. Stay with us. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk here on Talk TV. Lots of tweets and messages coming in. Gary, who I have an ongoing economic discussion with, thinks that I'm naive, that if we cut VAT it won't bring down inflation because the retailers will not pass it on. Look, that is possible, Gary, but actually it's a very competitive world out there, and retailers are very keen to get more business, so I think that they would pass it on. And that's my view. It is really competitive out there amongst the retailers. And if you cut, for example, VAT on fuel duty by 20p a litre, then I've absolutely no doubt you can pass that on. And people like Howard Cox from Fair Fuel, they're arguing that there should be a proper mechanism, pump watch, to make sure of that point. But that's all part of the big tax debate that we're having. And I'm delighted that I have now got a Conservative MP who is supporting Liz Truss on the line, because regrettably, despite trying, no MP supporting Rishi Sunak, and we've tried well over a dozen now, wants to come on my show to talk about it. But Marco Longhi is the Conservative MP for Dudley North. He's with me on Zoom. Now, Marco, very good morning to you. Thanks for sparing the time this Sunday. So, clearly, the two candidates, they are putting forward their case with robust vigour. They're travelling up and down the country. We've got 6 weeks of this. But the big debate this week, and I've been focusing on, has been about tax. And it's almost like the Shakespearean to tax or not to tax, it seems. Insofar as Rishi Sunak is saying that we can't deal with inflation and cut taxes at the same time, whereas your candidate that you're supporting, Liz Truss, is saying we should cut taxes primarily on business. So why do you think that Liz Truss is right in this debate as opposed to the Sunak camp?
Because what we have seen in the past is that when you have economic policy that you align to more former chancellors such as Gordon Brown, you will see a policy of economic failure. You cannot tax yourself to growth. You cannot tax yourself out of recession. And all previous analysis and studies have shown that if you reduce taxation, allow businesses and people to keep more of their own money, you stimulate growth. And that is an undeniable fact. So I really don't understand what the policy from Rishi Sunak is at this point in time, because as a former chancellor, I would have thought that he would have been on that side of the argument, but he clearly isn't.
No, he clearly isn't, and I'm completely with you on that. I, in my Sunday sermon, gave lots of evidence in history, but he's a smart guy. He worked for Goldman Sachs and hedge funds. I don't understand it either. It really is quite extraordinary. Maybe he's been sort of mesmerised by what I call the sort of the Treasury sort of mantra on this, and that he hasn't been sort of bold enough to overcome that.
And this is it, isn't it? We were given a mandate by the public, an 80-seat majority, to be bold. And reforming tax and reforming Whitehall are two things that I think that we should be looking at with vigour. And it does feel like Rishi has been institutionalised in many ways, because this is what the machine of Whitehall and the Treasury in particular would want him to do.
Now, we all know that, of course, Whitehall is very powerful. It's very hard to overcome what's called the sort of the Whitehall blob. Why do you think Liz Truss would be able to achieve that when so many others have tried and failed?
Well, I think you need to look at her track record as, first of all, Secretary of State for International Trade, and then subsequently in the Foreign Office. People can see that she has been probably the one cabinet member who's got a very good story to tell. So she's been able to go out there and deliver on the Brexit promises, which was to deliver on the free trade agreements, which were all the countries more broader and more deeper with a number of countries, and then actually started on some new ones as well. And I've been working more closely in that department as the trade envoy to Brazil, and I can see some fantastic opportunities developing that we would not be in a position to develop on if we just had that very cautious approach, high tax approach, the more illiberal way of doing things, which is actually the more the EU way of doing things. So I'm fully behind Liz because I've seen her work. I've seen her deliver on the promises she made when she became Secretary of State for International Trade and subsequently as Foreign Secretary. So I'm fully behind her.
And the majority of the tax cuts that Liz Truss is talking about, she's mainly focusing on what are some of the business taxes on national insurance, on the corporation tax, which I agree with, but I would like her to focus more on what I call the consumer taxes, because that would help solve the cost of improve the cost of living crisis and reduce inflation.
And I agree with you partly on that. What maybe hasn't been reported as widely is the fact that, I mean, obviously I've been present at the hustings, and I know she absolutely wants to attack the Green Levy as well. She is somebody who is committed to greening our economy, but she's not one of those that is either, you know, in Parliament you see this this debate. Either you're an eco-warrior or you want to burn the planet. And it's not a binary conversation. And Liz is a very pragmatic person who will, of course, want to secure the future of our planet in a very sensible way. But she also understands that on the back of COVID, on the back of a war in Ukraine, that we need to be much more sensible about this, because you cannot deliver these sort of net zero promises at any cost whatsoever. So she is going to be looking at both sides of that equation. She will be looking at the Green Levy for people's fuels and domestic bills and people's family bills. So she is looking at that side as well, not just corporation tax.
I think that's really, really important, because many people in Westminster talk about, you know, we've got to save the planet for the future of our children and our grandchildren, but the planet's existed for millions of years, and
it has.
And climate change will go on for the next million years. And we have to adapt, and I think that's, you know, but fundamentally, the best way of looking after our children and grandchildren is to make sure we've got jobs and money in this economy and not send it all overseas, surely.
Correct. And one of the things that we haven't been particularly good at, we've been announcing at how green we are, but actually a lot of that has been on the basis of offshoring a lot of our own carbon footprint. So that is not correct. And when you look at the amount of carbon that we emit as a country, it is but a tiny drop in the ocean.
It's about 1%.
Exactly. And when you look at what China and the United States and other major economies are pumping out, we are tiny. But we should do the right thing. We should pursue this, but not at any cost. We need to be very pragmatic about it.
Absolutely right. Two more things in the time. Where is Liz Truss on shale gas, which we've got, give or take, £1 trillion worth of treasure under our feet, that the Conservative Party promised in their 17 manifesto to use?
Right.
Where is she on this? Because, you know, that would actually save CO2 emissions rather than importing gas.
On that, I agree personally with you on that. I would be a supporter of fracking and developing the immense resources that we have underneath our feet. That would, and I would be one for wanting to store energy.
And where's Liz Truss on this?
But I'm going to be answering the question truthfully. I don't know. That has not come up in the hustings, believe it or not.
Could you have
a good question to ask?
Could you have a word with her, please, and maybe come back and let us know? And the other thing, which I know she has worked on, is the obviously very, very thorny issue of Northern Ireland, the protocol. I know she's got the bill, but you've got a very, very intransigent, difficult House of Lords. Why not show boldness and courage if she wins and becomes the new Prime Minister, actually by just invoking Article 16 at a time when we've got negotiating leverage with the EU?
Right. So as you can imagine, this is about a negotiated process. I completely agree with the situation over the House of Lords, and the House of Lords do know that eventually the House of Commons will ultimately say this is how it's going to be. You know, the ping-pong process will take place. We'll give them the chance to, you know, put forward their views, but ultimately Parliament, as in the House of Commons, will take a view and a final view on it. We have wanted to make sure, and this is where Liz has been very clever, as Foreign Secretary, to give the EU every possible opportunity to come to the table and come to a negotiated outcome, and that has been her approach. If ultimately they maintain that position, which is an intransigent position really, where they will not budge, then we will have to deal with it, and if that means Article 16,
and how
that's
long
what it will have to be.
How long would you give them? I mean, you know, I'm an impatient man.
And so am I. And I've had a one-to-one with Liz over this. I'm very much a unionist. I see Northern Ireland as part of one United Kingdom, and I know she does as well. But she obviously has operated in spheres, in negotiated tables at very high levels that I haven't. But I'm keeping that pressure on behalf of our brothers in Northern Ireland.
Marco Longhi, thank you so much for that. We'll keep making sure she does show that boldness if she wins. That was the Conservative MP for Dudley North, Marco Longhi, who had the courage to come on my show and talk about the candidate that he is supporting, Liz Truss. Give us a call with your thoughts, your views, 0344 499 1000. If there's any Tory MPs out there, or anybody knows any who support Rishi Sunak, please do come on my show. Have a little bit of courage. I'm not going to bite. Don't worry. It's not that bad. And tell me why actually we're wrong and that Sunak is the right person for the job. Stay with us. We're going to be talking about immigration with the wonderful Out Mehmet after the break. Don't go anywhere. Keep those messages, those calls coming in, and we will read them out. They're pouring in as we speak. It's Tice Talk. It's the home of Common Sense Talk TV.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 11.
Good morning, I'm Nadira Tudor. The Port of Dover says it's currently taking around 60 minutes to clear security checks for travel to France. Traffic levels appear to be back to normal after 2 days of severe delays on surrounding roads and queues of up to 7 hours yesterday. Meanwhile, Eurotunnel have warned of a delayed service at Folkestone. Travel expert Simon Calder says the extra border checks required because of Brexit are slowing things down.
Once the deal was negotiated, we said we want to be third country citizens, therefore we want an external EU border, and we want to have all our passport stamps. And the rough estimate is that it takes about 3 times longer to process a carload of people.
The Board of Cricket Scotland has resigned with immediate effect following allegations of racism. It comes after it was revealed yesterday that a devastating review into Scottish cricket has found it to be institutionally racist. Ukraine's president has accused Russia of barbarism. It's after a missile attack on the port of Odessa following a landmark deal to resume grain exports from Ukraine on Friday. People's Deputy of Ukraine, Alexei Honcharenko, says it proves Russia could not be trusted to stick with the deal.
People are concerned, and in general, like Putin showed again to the whole world that she is not going to respect any agreements, anything, and he doesn't understand any language except of language of force.
A murder investigation has been launched after a stabbing in West London. The man, believed to be in his 50s, was pronounced dead following the attack inside a pub. No arrests have been made. The World Health Organization has declared monkeypox a global health emergency, the highest alert that can be issued. However, health officials in the UK are urging people not to panic.
For people in the UK, the alert yesterday from WHO doesn't signal any increased risk from where we were the day before. But I think what it does do, it's a call to arms for countries across the world to work together.
Both Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have promised to crack down on migration into the UK as parts of their bids to become Prime Minister. The former Chancellor claims he'll do whatever it takes to make it work in a bid to tackle illegal immigration, despite previously raising concerns about the Rwanda policy. And the Foreign Secretary says she'll increase the number of Border Force staff. Meanwhile, the most senior minister in the Cabinet Office has warned that HS2 is one of the projects that could spell trouble. The Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Kit Malthouse, told The Telegraph that it was akin to a killer whale and that could rip the arm off the next Prime Minister. Now, time for today's weather.
The Sunday Times Wine Club sponsors Talk TV weather.
It's a mixed weather picture this morning, rather breezy with outbreaks of rain across the north and the west, whilst the southeast in particular will remain dry and sunny. Taking a look at the midday snapshot, and much of Scotland will be largely cloudy with showery rain in places. Some brighter breaks are possible, especially for parts of the Caithness and Sutherland, as well as Aberdeenshire. A Met Office warning has been issued for Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland due to heavy and thundery showers through the afternoon and evening. Parts of Wales, the West Midlands and into Yorkshire will also see some rain at times, though the East Midlands and East Anglia should be dry and sunny. In southern England, it will be mostly dry with the best of the sunshine in the southeast into the evening, and it will remain unsettled across the north and west of the UK, but staying sunny in the southeast.
The Sunday Times Wine Club sponsors Talk TV weather.
The Sunday Night Club is your club. I'll take you inside the dressing room, from the terraces to the boardroom, to ask the questions you want answered. There is no membership required for the Sunday Night Club from 7.
Welcome back, my friends. Here we are on Tice Talk. We're into the second hour. We've had a busy chat so far about tax, about the leadership debate. We've had an economist. We've had an MP supporting Liz Truss. We still can't find an MP supporting Rishi Sunak prepared to come on my show, but we're still trying for you. We've got 2 hours to go. If anybody's listening who's in that camp, give us a shout and we'll get you on. Meanwhile, another important part of the in tray for any future Prime Minister is the issue of immigration, both legal and illegal. It's a huge issue. Every day, hundreds are coming across the channel. We know it, and I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by one of the real experts who spends nothing else but his whole time focusing on this issue, Alp Mehmet, the chairman of Migration Watch in UK. Thank you so much for joining me. So,
good morning, Richard.
Good morning to you. And finally, we have got a little bit in the papers of some views from the two candidates about what they would do. We'll come on to that in a minute. But firstly, I just wanted to catch up with you on this report that came out this week from the Chief Inspector of Borders, David Neal, about some of the things that's gone on in Border Force, dealing with the migrants coming across the channel. Pretty shocking stuff, wasn't it? I mean, lots of people absconding, disappearing from hotels, not even taking their proper surnames, and so on, not taking biometric fingerprints and things. I mean, how bad is this?
It was awful. Really bad, actually, and I think worse than anyone was even imagining. I think that they've probably addressed some of the issues now. We were pointing to all that was going on for months and months and months beforehand. We even now, frankly, they are being placed in hotels, and whilst the biometric stuff is all being done when they arrive, the fact is there's still no real control over those once they're placed in hotels, safe hotels, we're told. What does that mean?
Well, that's a very good question. What does that mean? And to any of you, Alp is with me for the next 20 minutes or so. If anybody's got any questions or any experiences, do you live near a hotel that's been taken long-term by the Home Office to fill it with illegal migrants? Then give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Alp will take your questions, your calls, your thoughts, any which way, so that we get that interaction. You might have an experience, you might live on the south coast, or you may be next to one of those hotels. So you're pretty concerned about this report, which clearly is shocking. But have you got any confidence that anything's actually changing as we speak?
Not to any significant extent, frankly, because, as I said, they're going into hotels, but then it seems that they're not keeping a close eye on them, and they're able to abscond anyway. What I would do now is send in the inspector again, just to see that what we are told has been done really is in place, because I have my doubts that there is any real absolute control.
Because what was really shocking was this report was given to the Home Office on the 24th of February, and they sat on it until this week, until they were literally shamed into producing it, because David Neal himself issued his own press release saying they were still sitting on it.
Yes, I'm afraid that the Home Office over the last few years has had a habit of sitting on unpleasant and hard-hitting reports. To be fair to Priti Patel, I think that a lot of what he says, she has done her best to address. The fact is that when it comes to the practicalities of the sort of system that you put in place, it's inadequate. And that's the one thing that comes out not only with the Chief Inspector's report, but with Alexander Downer's report as well, where the whole structure of the immigration system, of the asylum system, really needs change, root and branch, if anything is going to happen.
And I guess the question is, actually, can it change with the existing leadership in Border Force and in the Home Office? Or actually, does it need, essentially, do we just need to be honest and say, look, the department's not fit for purpose, and it essentially needs a new team that actually believe in what they're doing? You know, that's my thought. Because you've got to find solutions to the problem, and if it isn't working, then we've got to do something differently, haven't we?
Well, it's all about the political backing, actually. Civil servants, most of them, at least in my day as a civil servant, you would do what the politicians told you to do.
But I think things
they
have
were
changed.
answerable, you were not. I don't think that... I think too much is made, frankly, of the fact that somehow civil servants have taken over the policy and are running with it. That's not so. It's the political control that is necessary and is inadequate and has been inadequate.
Interesting, because, but we, you know, Priti Patel talks a great game and always says she wants to get on top of it, but there's often been lots of inferences that actually she's being hindered by people in the Home Office, and indeed like the Civil Service Union, who've tried to block some of this stuff?
Well, some of it they have legally tried to. I think that's wrong. That's appalling, frankly, that any civil service union should be working against the government that its union members are actually a part of. I mean, that's just a nonsense. I think that it's all political, it's all to do with the legislation in place, and it's all to do with the way measures that are introduced are implemented. That's what's going wrong, not civil servants suddenly deciding, I'm not going to do this.
Interesting. Yeah, I've got real concerns about that. I think we've got Stephen on the line with a question for you, Alp. Stephen, a very good morning to you. Thanks for giving us a buzz. Have you got a question for me or Alp on this issue?
Yes, I do. Good morning to you both. Alp Mehmet, I'd like to know, because he probably has a better handle on the numbers than you do, no disrespect.
Definitely he does. Absolutely right, Stephen.
But why the Conservatives in their manifesto, on which they were voted in, and for Brexit as well, was to get migration, we're talking net migration figures, down into single figures. Now, or whatever that meant, into the hundreds. Now, all that's happened since then is net migration has, forget about illegal immigration, because that's all everyone's talking about, which is smaller numbers. The net migration into the country has gone up massively. And no one's talking about it. It's not mentioned. It's all swept under the carpet. And
Great question,
Rishi
Stephen.
Sunak also mentioned that he wants to see more visas given to the Asian community to come in to start businesses. Now, I'm afraid what's wrong with starting businesses in our own country? Why do we have to get, foreign people coming in
Stephen,
to start?
Great question. Let's see what Alp says.
Stephen, thank you so much. Before we came on air, this was exactly the point that I made to Richard, as he will testify. You're absolutely right. The one question that all the candidates, bar one, for the aspiring prime ministers have ducked has been overall net migration, which is now probably running at the highest ever. We don't know because there are no figures. However, we do know that, for example, there were 1 million long-term visas issued in the year to March this year. Now, that is higher than ever before, if that turns out to be the case, and I'm pretty sure it will. The fact is that 60% of people want net migration to be reduced. Something like 80% of Conservative supporters want it reduced, and yet they keep banging on about something that, frankly, I very much doubt they will ever be able to control, and that's cross-channel illegal migration.
And we've got this situation where essentially we've had record visas issued last year, and yet we seem to, we're told there's a labour shortage, which there is, and yet we've got record numbers of people on out-of-work benefits, and so it feels like it's a vicious circle in completely the wrong direction.
We did a bit of research not so long ago where we found that there were 4 million people who were either out of work and looking for work, or indeed were already in work but felt they were underemployed and had capacity to do more work. So there are millions of people out there, particularly with the temporary, seasonal, barista type of jobs. There's all sorts of, and any number of young people who would give their eye teeth to do it, and yet employers tend to go for the cheaper option, frankly, and that's bringing in people from overseas.
Stephen, if you're still on the line, does that help Alp's answer?
Yeah, but one thing that I would just add to that is that all of this is putting massive pressure on our overstrained infrastructure already.
Absolutely.
Whether it be housing, everyone's saying, well, build more houses. Why do we have to build more houses?
Absolutely.
Why do we have to pump more money into the bottomless pit of the NHS, where everyone can come in and use it free?
Funnily enough, Stephen, sorry to interrupt you, But Kemi Badenoch was the only one who made this point that unless we tackle overall immigration and bring numbers down, we can never build enough houses, frankly. It will not happen. That's why it's so important to reduce overall net migration by a lot.
Stephen, thank you so much for that great call with that question about, because obviously there's illegal immigration, but there's also lawful migration, and our population in England in the last 20 years has increased by in the order of 10 million, hasn't it? So Stephen's quite right, that pressure on all the public services, housing and infrastructure.
Well, we've seen in the census report that population went up by 3.5 million. 3.5 million in 10 years. 6.6%. That's extraordinary. What is more, we heard from the government that 60% of that was because of immigration, and it was. But that's direct immigration. No one takes any account of the children born to new arrivals. And the fact is, if you take that into account, the population increase that we've seen over the last 10 years is something like 80 to 90% the result due to immigration in one way or another.
And, you know, the reality is that if the economy is growing fast and you've got a genuine labour shortage, then if you haven't got enough homegrown people to carry it out, then, you know, you need people from overseas. But that hasn't been the situation. We've had low growth, haven't we? And all it's done is to actually keep wages down.
Well, yes. I mean, one thing that's happened over the last 10, 15 years is that the gross domestic product, GDP per head, the cake, the overall cake, although it's grown, each slice that's available is actually smaller,
it's hardly
if not
moved.
the same.
We'll come back to that. Stay with us. If you've got a call for a question for Alp, then give us a call 0344 499 1000. He's here with me until about 11:30, so he can take your call. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere. It's Tice Talk. It is, of course, Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk here in the middle of the second hour of my show. We're talking about one of the issues that the two leadership candidates have now started to address, which is the issue of immigration, both legal and illegal immigration. Across the channel, we've had Rishi Sunak putting a sort of a 10-point plan, which all sounds very good, but when you actually read it out, there wasn't really much in it in terms of detail.
Frankly, I found it quite underwhelming.
Right.
There wasn't really anything new there, to be honest, and most certainly will not have any impact at all on the numbers coming across. They will continue to come. The only thing that would have an impact is if he were to agree with Macron that those who arrive illegally are immediately returned to France. I don't see him doing that or that happening anytime soon.
And just before going to a call in a second I'll go to, but neither of them are making a clear commitment about the European Convention on Human Rights, whether to stay or leave.
They've sort of... Rishi Sunak has given a qualified suggestion that he will pull out if necessary. I think that's right. We should pull out if necessary. But we've got to go beyond that, really. At the outset, when the whole thing first started, there were a few of them, including Liz Truss, but mainly Kemi Badenoch, who said, we will... Suella Braverman, who said, we will pull out.
A lot of them are very good at talking the talk, if necessary, but then they say, well, it's never necessary. Let's go to Ireland, actually, where Shane is on the line, hopefully with a question for you out. Morning, Shane.
Good morning. I had a question for that gentleman there, and I have a couple of questions to find out the legality of an idea I have.
Go for it.
Right. How much money have we handed Rwanda at the moment?
120 million.
And have we actually sent it already?
120 million.
They have it.
Right. Would it be possible, we say, for some minister to go down there to the Rwandan embassy and say, here, we want to lease you a couple of ships, or boats, anything, right? Put them under a Rwandan flag. We also want to lease you a gangway here in England, and a bit of ground then just to hold them round the airport.
Okay,
and a bus with diplomatic immunity to pick them up at the end of the gangway.
Let's let Out respond to that.
I'm not sure if it's possible to get a ship to Rwanda, but that aside, I'm not. You said you asked about the legality of it all. I'm not a lawyer, but I suspect that if we've had a problem getting through the international courts and our own courts, what we're trying to do at this stage, what you're suggesting, I just suspect will never see the light of day. It will get stuck in the courts and nothing will happen. All it will do is cost money.
That Rwanda could lease its own boats.
Yes.
Bring them to a gangway.
Yeah, no,
put them on a bus with diplomatic immunity and fly them straight to Uganda, and they never set foot on British soil.
The issue at the moment, though, Shane, of course, is that the European Court of Human Rights has basically stalled the whole process until there's a judicial review. That's right, isn't it?
Yes. But the European Court of Human Rights has said they are waiting for our Supreme Court to decide whether the legislation is legal in accordance with international law.
Yeah.
However, what I do agree with, Shane, is the sentiment of your question and what lies behind
Shane,
your question.
thank you so much for your call. Time is marching on. I know that we've got from Kent, we've got Kim on the line. Good morning, Kim. Thanks for calling. How are you, and what's your question for Alp?
Well, not very good, really, Richard, because, as you know, this coastline at the moment is under... Well, it's basically under invasion. And the big burning question I've got, because I've seen these landings and filmed them, when they land, they're told, you have illegally entered the United Kingdom, you are now under arrest. They're then boarded onto a coach and taken to be processed, triaged, as they call it, at Lyd Airport. I want to know, if they're under arrest, and they're going to be farmed out to some four-star hotel luxury somewhere, why are they not electronically tagged? Because if they're going to wander off or abscond, they should be tagged, surely.
I think some of them, maybe that was what Priti Patel suggested would happen. I'm not sure that frankly would work anyway. My own feeling is that it's all too easy to untag yourself. But you're right. I think you touch on an important point. The fact is that having been triaged, thereafter they're taken to hotels and effectively have the freedom to roam around at will and abscond if that is what they choose to do.
Because under the new Nationality and Borders Bill, that's right, they are essentially arrested, because the moment they land, that is an illegal arrival.
Yeah, it always was thus, even in the days when I was an immigration officer. If people arrived illegally, they were detained, and at that point they were considered as illegal entrants and were returned whence they came. That is no longer happening.
No, that's right. Kim, thank you for that. Was there any other quick question you had, Kim?
I just can't understand why it's been allowed to continue, because we know that they are coming in unescorted. They're arriving on this coast daily on dinghies. We find wet clothes everywhere. We see people walking down the road. We see them running across the landscape. They're knocking on people's doors. They're getting into waiting cars. And none of this, until now, seems to have surfaced.
No.
Well, you're absolutely right, Kim, and we at Migration Watch have been pointing to this for a long time. And please write to your MP. Please call in to shows like this and tell people about it, because it needs to be known, because it's going on.
It needs to be kept at the top of the agenda. Kim, thank you so much for your work and your interest in this subject. And we've also got another question that's just come in on the on Twitter, which is, please ask Alp, how many arrivals were accepted to be asylum seekers? Seems in 2020 it seems to be about 50%.
Yeah, the thing is not so much how many of them are granted asylum in the strictest sense of the word, but how many are allowed to stay here, perhaps given what is called humanitarian protection. But beyond that, even more importantly, how many of them who are not given that are ever returned? None, or very, very few.
And why does it take so long for the processing? I mean, I like to see the processing done in a couple of weeks, not 6 months or 18 months.
Well, if you can't send them back anywhere, if you don't know what their nationality is, then it becomes very difficult. Even when you establish that they are from a particular country, then there's the almighty process of getting documents issued to them from their country. I think that we should start acting a bit more robustly against those countries that are slow to document their nationals. But for all sorts of reasons, what we should be doing is very quickly returning them from wherever they came from, usually the other side of the channel.
And in a sense, a joint processing centre, the other side of the channel, if we could get the French to agree that, would surely be a really positive step.
Yes, I think that would certainly be a big step in the right direction. The fact is what happens after that? Why don't the EU or France or wherever, why don't they have that sort of operation at their borders? I mean, the fact is that they're able to walk in. Over 200,000, something like 240,000 came into the EU illegally in 2021.
Wow. 200, so almost a quarter of a million.
Why?
So that's a complete, basically, a complete failure of their own borders, essentially.
Absolutely.
And therefore, every country suffers the consequences of
EU
that.
Borders are extremely porous, as they will tell us.
Like a sieve. Alp, thank you so much for coming into the studio. Absolutely fantastic. That's Alp Mehmet, Chairman of Migration Watch, with his thoughts and your calls. We will do that again. Stay with us. So much more to come here on Tice Talk at Talk TV.
What was my biggest career moment? After spending about 25 years in Fleet Street, there's loads of stories I could tell you. But actually, I think I did an overnight show for Talk Radio in the early days, the night of the Brexit referendum. And that was actually quite a milestone, because, of course, we started off thinking that Remain had won. And at 2:30, 3:15, after Nigel Farage had already said he'd lost, it turned out he hadn't lost. And it turned out we were leaving the European Union. So that was quite a shocker.
This is Talk TV News.
Good morning, I'm Nadira Tudor. The Port of Dover says it's currently taking around 60 minutes to clear security checks for travel to France. Traffic levels appear to be back to normal after 2 days of severe delays on surrounding roads and queues of up to 7 hours yesterday. Meanwhile, Eurotunnel have warned of a delayed service at Folkestone. Travel expert Simon Calder says the extra border checks required because of Brexit are slowing things down.
Once the deal was negotiated, we said we want to be third country citizens, therefore we want an external EU border, and we want to have all our passport stamps. And the rough estimate is that it takes about 3 times longer to process a carload of people.
The Board of Cricket Scotland has resigned with immediate effect following allegations of racism. It comes after it was revealed yesterday that a devastating review into Scottish cricket has found it to be institutionally racist. The World Health Organization has declared monkeypox a global health emergency, the highest alert that can be issued. However, health officials in the UK are urging people not to panic.
For people in the UK, the alert yesterday from WHO doesn't signal any increased risk from where we were the day before. But I think what it does do, it's a call to arms for countries across the world to work together.
A state of emergency has been declared in a part of California as a wildfire continues to rapidly spread near Yosemite National Park. More than 6,000 people have been evacuated and 10 homes destroyed. And Margot Robbie has been confirmed as one of the former stars returning to Neighbours for the show's last ever episode. After 37 years on screen, the soap will come to a close with a double episode special on July the 29th. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back, my friends, to Talk TV. It's Tice Talk. We are now exactly halfway through the show. Lots of messages pouring in, literally, from you. Thanks for all of those. Lots of thoughts on the issue of immigration and also on the Sunak-Truss leadership debate. And one here, for example, all the candidates care about is winning the general election. They're all career politicians caring about their own careers. The voters are an afterthought. And that's Jane, who says, I don't want either of the last two to be PM. Well, that's a bit of a challenge because basically that is it. Unless somehow this petition being launched by Lord Cruddas to get Boris Johnson's name on the ballot paper gathers even more momentum. I think that's now well over 7,000 Tory members have asked for that. That'll be an interesting one to watch. But we have been talking in this second hour about security, about immigration, and as another part of that, law and order. Here in the UK, policing has been a huge issue, and report after report comes out showing, for example, how the charging rate has collapsed. It reduced down to just over 5% from 15% back in 2015. But good news, folks. We've got a report now that says from the College of Policing that the police, they should stop wasting time looking at online Twitter debates and maybe focus on catching criminals out on the streets. Well, that sounds quite a good thing. Let's talk to someone who really understands this issue, Harry Miller, who's the Chief Executive of the Bad Law Project, former police officer, founder of Fair Cop campaign, and someone who actually took on and won against the College of Policing. Harry, a very good morning. Thanks for joining us on...
nice to see you. Nice to see you, Richard.
Great to see you.
I remember when we won our victory against the College of Policing at the Court of Appeal, you and I had breakfast that morning around Lawrence Fox's table.
We did indeed, and we were talking about, some of these issues. But unfortunately, Harry, it seems to be getting worse, not better. You took on the College of Policing. I must say, it seems a slight irony that it's now the College of Policing that's saying that police need to focus on cutting crime and apply some common sense. I mean, I'd have thought that was a pretty basic starting point, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the problem with this is, Richard, you probably haven't read the guidance, have you? The Daily Mail certainly haven't read the guidance because they were saying what a great victory it was for free speech. Let me tell you right away, it's not. What they've done, they've taken a pot of jam and they've simply put on a new label, called it strawberry preserve, and hope that none of us notice. The guidance that we have at the moment is every bit as bad as the guidance which was declared unlawful. This is a corporate exercise in ass covering, nothing more. I'll give you an example. It's got rid of what it calls mandatory recording, but it's replaced it with recording, and here's the definition, a single distinct event or occurrence which disturbs an individual or causes them concern. Well, pardon me for not getting overexcited by that. That is still an incredibly low bar. All it takes is someone to have histrionics and claim that their digestive processes have been disturbed and they are now super concerned because of something that I've said, or Maya Forstadt has said, or J.K. Rowling said, or Lawrence Fox has said, and we're in exactly the same position. The police will record, and the recording will still be revealable on an enhanced DBS check.
So you think
the rest
actually...
of it, all of the good stuff that's in there, that is ass covering. That's so that the next time they get taken to court, they still will have enough to say, I'm sorry, but the police force went rogue. It's got nothing to do with our guidance, mate.
So you think, actually, then, that it's a question of sort of smoke and mirrors, and they want to be seen to be doing the right thing, but actually they're not really changing the guidance. But OK, so Harry, but can individual police forces essentially park the guidance on their desk and decide to do something else? Or is this guidance obligatory?
Yes. They can do that, but that relies on chief constables operating common sense. Now, we know for a fact that chief constables do not like common sense. I know this for a fact because after I'd taken the Humberside police to the High Court and won, if you remember, the chief constable was likened to the Stasi, the Cheka and the Gestapo. By the way, this is not a good thing. It's a little bit like a doctor's practice being likened to Joseph Mengele and Harold Shipman and Beverly Allert. This is not a good thing.
And Harry,
hold on a minute. The chief constable said to me, I said, why on earth did somebody in your organisation not apply some common sense? And he said to me, Harry, you should know, common sense is not an appropriate tool for a police officer. What we need is guidance. Well, they've been given more guidance. It's confusing guidance. And given that they are still pushing the narrative that bad commentary, that disagreeable tweets are the first step in a process that ultimately ends in genocide, I think it's highly unlikely that the police are going to be behaving significantly differently.
So, Harry, we've now got 6 forces, including the 2 largest forces in the country, in special measures. And the 2 largest forces, Greater Manchester Police and the Met, have now got they've both got new leaders. So we should perhaps be initially optimistic that there might be some change. Just because my glass is always half full, it's never half empty. Do you have any optimism that with some of this new leadership there may be change, or are you fearful that it's just going to be more of the same?
It's going to be more of the same. Until the National LGBT Police Network is closed down, until the College of Policing is closed down, until we have a police Brexit, then there is no hope at all. And what I mean by that is this. The National LGBT Police Network is a fully signed up member of the EU police network, which takes its orders directly from Ursula von der Leyen, which has adopted Rainbow Europe and which considers British sovereignty to be secondary to the European model. Until we shut that down and close that down and have a policing Brexit, we are lost.
Right.
So
you share none of my optimism that they might actually get some officers back on the beat, getting to know their communities and preventing.
Let me tell you this. Last week, 3 police officers turned up in a riot van on a quiet suburban street, their body cams on, their stab vests on, to knock on the door of a resident over a Facebook post. 3 police officers did that.
Goodness me.
And then they proceeded to shake the guy down and say, look, you've got a choice. We either take you to court or you pay your 60 quid and go on a re-education course. That happened last week. So no, I have absolutely no hope at all for the police thing. I mean, I do ultimately, but I think it's going to take a lot more action. Unfortunately, the Bad Law Project, which is headed up by me, we've got money in the coffers and we are watching every single police force, and we are more than happy to take the chief constables to court. The second they put a foot wrong, we're going to be taking them to court. We cannot rely on the College of Policing. They don't care.
It sounds like you've got a busy task ahead, and it's disappointing, Harry, that you share none of that optimism. Continuing tough times, it seems to me. Thanks for that, Harry Miller from the Bad Law Project, founder of Fair Cop Campaign. We're taking your calls, your tweets, your messages. You know the number, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk. We are still in the second hour. We've been talking about security issues, the issue of immigration, both legal and illegal. And then we were talking there with Harry Miller about policing and his real concern that actually, despite the report, despite the suggestion from the College of Policing that police shouldn't be taking on online non-hate crimes, then actually he thinks that the guidance is still there, still exists. Meanwhile, lots of messages coming in before we go to your calls. One here from Tony, who says, my Tory MP for Barrow-in-Furness, is not interested that there's illegal channel crossers in the hotel just a quarter of a mile from where we build nuclear submarines and ship nuclear waste from Sellafield, which he thinks is a potential terrorist threat. That's just one view from Tony. Thanks for that. We're going to go to some calls. First of all, we're going to head down to gorgeous Devon, where I imagine it's lovely today, where Marion is on the line. Hi, Marion.
Hi, Richard. Yes, just a quick thing. For a long time, I just feel there's a lack of will, there's a lack of patriotism, the civil service. Well, I think they are saboteurs, many of them, and that's why we can't get anything done. All the institutions we held dear at one time have been broken down slowly and slowly, and this is the result, whether it's in the judiciary, the legal system, the police, education. It's a dumbing down of all our institutions.
Yeah, I think you're so right about this. It's almost like a sort of managed decline. It was an expression used in the 70s. You know, our civil service used to be supposedly the sort of the envy of the world, but it seems to have gone into complete reverse.
Yes, it's no accident. It's been engineered, and it's been going on since probably before the wars. Europe have always stood for no borders, anyone can go where they want, no sense of national identities, and it's all to do with this globalisation.
But when you say it's been engineered, but I mean, I'm struggling to believe that utter incompetence and a lack of productivity is engineered. I think more it's about a failure of leadership and a failure of a sort of proper focus and desire to get stuff done.
But the failure, it didn't just happen by accident. These people are there to, they climb up the slippery pole into government and the civil service, and actually we're not really being run by our leaders, are we? We're being run by the people whose faces you don't see.
Well, this is the point, and I raised it earlier, that far too often the civil service, I think, are not carrying out the will of the ministers, the elected representatives, and they've got their own agenda.
Exactly.
And they put, and I think that I think in many cases is deliberate.
It is deliberate, and it's been going on for decades. This is no accident. This is no accident.
So you're a watcher and believer in Yes Minister, that great TV programme from the 80s.
Do you know something? I've only seen a couple of them, but
they're fantastic.
I always intend to go back and
watch the whole lot. It's absolutely fantastic. Marion, thank you so much for that call. That was Marion in Devon. She's concerned about the civil service, the failures. Has it been incidental? Has it been deliberate? What are your thoughts? Thanks for that. Lots of messages coming in here. One from Meek, who says, great Sunday sermon on tax, but if it's that simple, why do the government find it so hard to sort out the cost of living, Lark? Really good question. Again, I just think maybe it's a lack of understanding or a lack of will. But let's go to Gloucestershire and find out Christine's thoughts. Good morning, Christine.
Good morning, Richard. Firstly, I'd like to say I totally enjoyed your sermon. I thought it was brilliant.
Oh, well, thank you.
And I agree with everything you said.
Excellent. Good start. Is there a but coming, or what's on your mind?
Well, stating the obvious, unemployed people don't pay tax, right? There's absolutely no point in going to work if your earnings are so low that they don't cover the cost of your rent, mortgage and energy bills. So, there are people who there's no point in going to work. They need to take the VAT off fuel because a lot of people now can't afford to go to work because the public transport is so terrible anyway, and buses every 2 hours and things like that. And the last bus being at 5:30 in the provinces. They need to take the VAT off fuel for a temporary period, at least.
You're so right, Christine. I've heard this time and again where people who might normally, whether it's 20, 30 miles to work, and actually they literally cannot afford to do it.
No, and they can't even, not even that, from, say, South Gloucestershire to Gloucester City, for example, it's only about 30 miles. and they can't afford to go. The tax threshold should be raised to 20,000, and I agree with you on that, because it's going to make that worth going to work, and then
exactly, and that increases the incentive to work and the differential. Because as you quite rightly said, Christine, benefits are not taxed. But if that means that those in work actually end up earning post-tax less than they can get on benefits, then you've got literally the worst of all worlds.
Exactly. Employers also need to be able to afford to employ people and pay them a decent wage. The increase in employers' national insurance is a disaster. And it's also a disaster, of course, for people in employment. So that is a ludicrous thing to do to increase the national insurance.
The national insurance. You're so right, Christine. You're on the ball, you're on the case. Thank you very much for those thoughts. It does seem to me that a lot of this actually really is basic common sense. You know, none of us are rocket scientists, but we know this is the case. And what really annoys me, I wonder why the politicians can't work this out. Is it because they're being given bad advice or the wrong advice by civil servants? Or is it just they haven't got the courage of their own convictions to understand this stuff? Let's go back to Devon. There's a lot going on in Devon this morning because Harry is on the line.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
I'm all right. How's... the telephone lines are buzzing in Devon. What's on your mind?
My thing is actually a bit different to what everyone else has been going on. So mine's about tax inequality for single people. Now, I earn a very good salary, I must admit, about 70,000, single, no kids, and even on 70 grand, I can't afford to buy a house. Why is that? Because I spent a very long time in education, not earning, to get where I am now. So I've spent many years at university to train to where I am now. And I paid for that myself, so I've got the debt hanging over me for that. But it sounds like a lot, but I'm struggling myself. You know, we're always talking about sort of the lower end of the spectrum, but at the moment, I think everyone's hurting. Now, two people in a relationship who earned... they live together, they earn 35 grand each, so overall the same as me in my household. I pay about 21.5 grand in tax a year, and they pay 15.5 grand in a year. So effectively, I'm paying 6 grand a year singleton tax. And it's the same thing with council tax. So I live alone, so I have to pay 75% of the council tax for the property, which I think is fundamentally unfair.
So essentially what you're saying is that there's an inequality in the tax system which favours you as opposed to married couples. Have I got that right?
Other way around. It favours the people either married or cohabiting but living together. Their household income is 6 grand more a year more than mine. So how's that fair?
Right. Well, I mean, fundamentally, most of the tax system, of course, is based on tax the individual. And so you've got an economies of scale. If there are two people living in one house, then you're paying the same amount of council tax, so you're going to be paying less. I've got that right, haven't I?
But the problem, no, because you see, I have to pay higher rate tax on that.
Yes, because you're earning more. I mean, obviously, 70 grand is sort of just over double the average national salary.
Correct, but what I'm saying to you is that if two people live together and have a combined income of 70 grand,
yes,
they've got 6 grand extra to pay for a mortgage or rent. I have to rent. That's 6 grand I could be spending on saving for my own home or whatever, so I could own it myself.
And that's mainly driven by the married tax allowance, is it?
No, it's just that's a combination of two people's personal allowance.
Yes, of course. Thank you for clarifying that. So what would you like to see happen instead, Harry?
I think there should be some sort of allowance for it being a total household income that your tax is based on.
Interesting.
So if two people live together, one was.
But I get that. But arguably, would that not accentuate the housing crisis? You'd have more people living on their own.
So what?
Well, we've got a housing crisis, and it's inaffordable for much harder for people on low incomes to afford. So that's.
What about people? I think a lot of that problem is down to the high rates of divorce.
Well, that's an issue as well, isn't it? And obviously you've got a fast-growing population. But the reality is that we're not building enough homes as we speak. Harry, great call. Thank you for that. That's Harry there, who is living on his own, earning 70,000, but still finding it not easy. I'm going to head from Devon up to Cheltenham, where Alex is on the line. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
I'm all right. What's on your mind? Just quickly before we go to the top of the hour.
I think they should just do the tax plan that they put in the manifesto they got elected on, raising all the thresholds with inflation.
Hang on, Alex. Now you're talking about keeping up with their promises. Surely that's never going to happen, is it?
It would. I mean, no, rather than pulling out random giveaways and things, just do what you got elected on. Not you, but, for them, just, if you think from 2019, pull the brackets up 12% to cover the inflation.
Exactly.
It would be in a better position.
It's about keeping the promises, isn't it, Alex?
Yeah, and don't come up with new ways to give away money while you're overtaxing us. Just do what you put in the manifesto.
Well, that, in a sense, is one of the reasons why Boris has been outed, because he hasn't carried out what he said and he wasn't able to tell us the truth. Alex, great call. Just do what's in the manifesto. That's a very, very simple message from Cheltenham. Thank you for that from Alex. And we've got a tweeting come here. The caller, Marion, nailed it. The problems began with Blair and Cool Britannia and champagne socialism. There we are. Another one, lots of support for Harry Miller and his concerns about policing. Lots of support for that. Keep those calls coming in. We're going into the third hour of the show, and we're going to be talking about climate sanity. How actually we should do things properly as opposed to what the eco-extremists want us to do. Stay with us. You're listening to the home of common sense. It's Tice Talk. It is Talk TV.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 12.
Good afternoon, I'm Nadira Tudor. The Port of Dover says it's currently taking around 60 minutes to clear security checks for travel to France. Traffic levels appear to be back to normal after 2 days of severe delays on surrounding roads and queues of up to 7 hours yesterday. Meanwhile, Eurotunnel have warned of a delayed service at Folkestone. Travel expert Simon Calder says the extra border checks required because of Brexit are slowing things down.
Once the deal was negotiated, we said we want to be third country citizens, therefore we want an external EU border, and we want to have all our passport stamps. And the rough estimate is that it takes about 3 times longer to process a carload of people.
Has declared monkeypox a global health emergency, the highest alert that can be issued. There are now 16,000 cases reported worldwide. However, health officials in the UK are urging people not to panic.
For people in the UK, the alert yesterday from WHO doesn't signal any increased risk from where we were the day before. But I think what it does do, it's a call to arms for countries across the world to work together.
A murder investigation has been launched after a stabbing in West London. The man, believed to be in his 50s, was pronounced dead following the attack inside a pub. No arrests have been made. Ukraine's president has accused Russia of barbarism. It's after a missile attack on the port of Odessa following a landmark deal to resume grain exports from Ukraine on Friday. People's Deputy of Ukraine, Alexei Honcharenko, says it proves Russia could not be trusted to stick with the deal.
People are concerned. And in general, like Putin showed again to the whole world that she is not going to respect any agreements, anything, and he doesn't understand any language except of language of force.
A state of emergency has been declared in parts of California as a wildfire continues to rapidly spread near Yosemite National Park. The Oak Fire, as it's been named, has continued to grow in size since starting on Friday. More than 6,000 people have been evacuated and 10 homes destroyed. And Girls Aloud reunited today for the first time in 9 years to honour their late band member Sarah Harding. Nicola Roberts, Cheryl Tweedy and Nadine Coyle took part in a special Race for Life for Sarah 5K event to celebrate her life and raise money for breast cancer. The much-loved singer died aged 39 in September last year. Those are the latest news headlines. Still to come, your Talk Sport update, but first, your weather.
Times Food and Drink sponsors Talk TV weather.
It remains unsettled across the north and west of the UK with outbreaks of rain and brisk winds. Quite a contrast to southeast England, where it remains sunny as temperatures approach 30 Celsius. At 7 o'clock this evening, northern parts of Scotland will see further spells of showery rain. Some of these will be heavy and perhaps thundery at times. A Met Office rain warning has been issued for rain across Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland due to heavy thundery showers. Rather windy across northern England and into Wales with sunny spells and scattered showers. Mostly dry for the Midlands with temperatures around 20 Celsius, just the odd shower possible. Spells of warm sunshine holding on across southeast England and East Anglia. Perhaps a few showers developing for southwest England, but there'll be a few sunnier breaks too. Heading through the evening and overnight, most places will see a mixture of clear spells and scattered showers.
Times Food and Drink sponsors Talk TV weather.
Hello again. The entire board of Cricket Scotland has resigned following allegations it was institutionally racist. A review into discrimination is expected to be published tomorrow. The directors say they haven't seen the report but apologise to everyone who's experienced racism or discrimination in cricket in Scotland. Chelsea boss Thomas Tuchel has slammed his side after they were thrashed by Arsenal. They lost 4-0 to the Gunners at the friendly in Orlando just 2 weeks before the start of the new season. Mr Tuchel said that they deserved to lose and questioned his players' commitment.
The level of physical commitment that I saw that we could not match, and also a level of mental commitment which we lack, because we have a lot of players who think about leaving and looking for their options.
Dina Asher-Smith is now in a major doubt for the Commonwealth Games after she pulled up during the sprint relay at the World Championships. It put the Brits out of medal contention in the race. But it was better news for the men. A new-look GB quartet say it's time to look to the future after they clinched a bronze medal in the men's 4x100 metres at the World Championships in Oregon. The team finished behind Canada and the USA to secure their spot on the podium. That's all for now. I'll be back with more in half an hour.
The Sunday Night Club is your club. I'll take you inside the dressing room, from the terraces to the boardroom, to ask the questions you want answered. There is no membership required for the Sunday Night Club from 7.
Welcome back, my friends. We have flown into the third hour of Tice Talk, and yes, I've been pulled up on Twitter by Kevin, who quite rightly said I was being a bit slow with Harry on that phone call. I was genuinely. First of all, the fact that as a single person he was struggling on £70,000 a year, that was interesting, and that's got a few people commenting on Twitter. And then his concern that actually he was having to pay more tax than a couple, and it was just quite a speechless moment. But there we are. The reality is that obviously two people, you've got two personal tax allowances, but Harry thought that was unfair. There we go. What is also, I think, unfair is the issue of the impact of net zero on our lives in terms of the affordability, the risks to our jobs, and indeed the amount of money that we're going to have in our bank accounts. Because if we're not careful, the only zero is going to be zero jobs and zero cash in our bank accounts because of the cost of heading towards net zero. And that's why I'm very focused on having a segment in every week's show, what I call climate sanity, because it's really, really important. You know, we all care about the environment. We all want cleaner air, particularly those of us who live in cities and things. That's an absolute given. But we want to reduce emissions in a way that is sensible and is affordable. And the last thing in the world we want is for countries like China and India to be taking our jobs and our money whilst they're laughing at us. And maybe, just maybe, actually we should be brave enough to say there's a better way of doing things. There's a better way of reducing emissions. There's a better way of dealing with the issues and the risks around climate change. And that's why there's a fascinating, absolutely fascinating report that came out this week. It's about 15 pages long. I would urge you to read it. Hopefully there's a link on the strap to that. But netzerowatch.com is the place to go. And their deputy director, Andrew Monford, wrote this report about how we should adapt rather than mitigate, and that actually the cost would be much lower. And it really is a brilliant read, and that's why it's great to have Andrew Monford on the line now, this afternoon. Andrew, thanks for joining me on Tice Talk. And so you've written another great report on, actually, that we would be, in a sense, much better learning from the history of what our predecessors have done, which is to adapt and to learn and to use our intelligence to issues around climate change and when sea levels may rise, rather than spend a great deal more money with uncertain outcomes. Talk us through it.
Well, you talk about climate sanity. I guess the place to start is that what we're doing at the moment is not rational. That climate change is a problem, but it's not a huge problem. The official view of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is that if we do nothing, we'll take a hit to GDP of 2.6% in the year 2100. 2.6% is not a lot. I mean, we went down, in 2008 in the financial crisis? I think we went down 10% or something. You know, it's a problem, but it's not a huge problem. We're spending much more trying to prevent that happening than the damage itself. Essentially, the medicine is worse than the disease.
That sounds familiar, doesn't it?
I mean, it is extraordinary. We are spending several times more in terms of trying to deal with the problem than the problem itself would cause. So that's the place to start. then you say, well, is there a different way we can deal with this? And that's adaptation. Adaptation as opposed to mitigation. Mitigation being trying to change the weather in a century hence by decarbonising our society. Can we just say, okay, instead of having a hit to GDP of 2.6%, let's see what happens if we then adapt. Okay, let's just as the climate changes, let's deal with it. And this is something we've been doing for millennia. I mean, one of the things that I mentioned in the paper is that you can find evidence of seawalls being built by prehistoric man in the sort of the oceans off the coast of Israel, in the Mediterranean. You can find what appears to be a prehistoric seawall. Now, obviously, it's underwater now, so it wasn't a very successful seawall, but building seawalls is something several millennia on that we're very good at. So if you look at the problems that climate change might cause, the damage is meant to come, the big chunks are from sea level rise and from flooding. Now, building seawalls to deal with sea level rise is something we're very good at. We're so good, in fact, that if you look at how the surface area, the land surface area of the Earth has changed in the last 30 or 40 years, we've actually gained more land in coastal areas from land reclamation and silt coming down rivers and things than we've lost to sea level rise. We're actually in a net gain position.
This is one of the remarkable things, isn't it? Because the extremists and the fanatics who seem to be so utterly terrified and petrified about climate change, they highlight that, you know, sea level rise, that we're all going to get flooded and we're all going to just sit there and let ourselves sort of drown, which of course is nonsense. Whereas actually we've always adapted to it. I'm also struck by a comment in the IPCC report itself that says even if we went to net zero tomorrow, it would take a couple of 100 years before it had any impact on sea level.
Absolutely. So, the idea that we should be trying to change the weather is therefore clearly a nonsense. And adaptation has all these great advantages. One, it is a fraction of the cost. You know, it's an order of magnitude cheaper than trying to change the weather. But also, you actually only need to adapt when it becomes necessary and if it definitely becomes necessary. At the moment, we're trying to change the weather in a century's time on the assumption that the climate scientists' models are correct and telling us the truth. Now, of course, you know, having been through a pandemic and seen what all the modelers are doing there.
Exactly, because we've got quite a lot of experience of some of these modelers. I mean, we had the models that Brexit would be a complete catastrophe, there'd be an immediate recession and that 500,000 people would lose their jobs, and that turned out to be nonsense. And then we had the COVID modelling from Neil Ferguson that also turned out to be nonsense. So why do people believe these models when, I mean, is there any evidence that if we reduce CO2 emissions, where's the evidence that that might actually change the climate?
I mean, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. So other things being equal, it will tend to warm the planet. But the question is whether those other things are genuinely equal. And there's all sorts of factors in there that the climate modelers, if you push them, will admit that they don't know. For example, the most important feedback in the climate system is clouds. Now, there's lots of different kinds of clouds, and a lot of them, we don't know whether they will have a warming tendency on the planet or a cooling tendency on the planet, you know, in a globally warmed world. So essentially, we don't know. So coming back to the adaptation thing, of course, you only need to build a seawall when your current seawall starts to be overtopped by the ocean. If things genuinely get worse, with mitigation, you're forced to trust the scientists and just go ahead and spend crazy sums of money.
So the sort of the magnitude of what you're talking about is that the mitigation proposals of trying to get to net zero is like an order of at least 10 times more than just adapting.
Correct. Okay, so there's various estimates doing the rounds. The one that I like to cite, if only because it's the biggest one, is McKinsey, the management consultancy, who said the capital cost alone might cost us 12% of GDP every year. That's the capital cost alone. So you may be doubling that once you get the higher sort of operational costs. Adaptation. I mean, we could spend £10 billion. I think that the plan for the UK out to the end of the century is to spend £10 billion on seawalls, and that's the biggest cost of global warming. So
you're saying it's better to adapt. I was also struck in your report, Andrew, just before we finished, that we've had 50 years of warming. Bearing in mind, back in the 70s, scientists were concerned about heading towards an ice age. We've had 50 years of warming, but there's been no change in wind speed nor summer rainfall. No, that's right. The winter rainfall has increased in Scotland only. I mean, it's actually pretty flat in the rest of the country. Wind speeds actually have fallen. The hurricanes and killer storms we were promised just haven't happened. It would be interesting, I think, to go back to the scare stories that when the scare stories started in the 80s and 90s, and actually revisit some of the predictions that British scientists made about what was going to be hitting us here in the UK, because essentially it hasn't happened. And just finally, I mean, you talk about adaptation. In Bangladesh, some extraordinary examples in your report about the changes in the last 40 or 50 years. Yeah, so Bangladesh is amazing, because Bangladesh is always held out as somewhere that is going to suffer the most. It's a poor country, and they're going to be hit by hurricanes, and they're going to and things like that, and they're going to disappear under the ocean. Now, in the 1970s, those of us who are that old can remember the Bowler hurricane, which killed 250,000 people. Now, a bigger hurricane hit Bangladesh a couple of years ago and killed, I think it was 25 people. I mean, they have adapted sadness, so but well. What you're saying is they've adapted. Yeah. They've built seawalls round the coast. We've got early warning systems so they can evacuate the coasts. We're not saying that storms aren't still happening. They don't seem to be getting worse, but they're still happening. It's just they're an inconvenience now rather than they've adapted disaster. And they've learned. Andrew, that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for those thoughts. Please do go to netzerowatch.com, read that incredible report by Andrew Montford, the Deputy Director, about adapting rather than mitigating. Some really, really interesting information in that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us. Coming up, we've got loads and loads more to talk about, so you know the number, or send us a tweet. It's Tice Talk, it's Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk here on Talk TV. We're well into the final hour of the show before Trisha Goddard comes at 1 o'clock. She's on for 3 hours. And then, of course, there is the great Kevin O'Sullivan from 4. And at 7 o'clock, it's Mark Saggers with his Sunday night show. That is a fantastic show. Do stay with us through those various presenters. Now, we've got Mike here. He's not very happy with me. He says that talking to us like children, pushing their agenda as usual about the climate, and that you should go to the BBC, How to Talk to a Climate Change Denier. Well, Mike, I'm not a denier. I'm one of those people who actually accepts that climate change has existed since day one for millions of years, and it will continue to exist for millions of years to come. The deniers are those people who think you can stop climate change, which, of course, is clearly a nonsense. But actually what you can do, it's about how we react to it. The climate is always changing, and what we're trying to do is have a rational, sensible discussion about the best way to react. Is it to adapt, or is it to spend 10 times more by trying to mitigate, but not sure that actually the mitigation will actually do what you're trying to do? That's what we're trying to do, and we're trying to have a rational discussion. And the worst thing of all is to disadvantage our grandchildren by sending all our jobs and money overseas to countries that don't mitigate. They adapt, and they laugh at us because they've taken our jobs and money. I hope that's clear, Mike, but do come back to me. Anyway, hopefully we've got on the line Tobias Elwood to talk about what's going on in Odessa. I'm just looking at my production team to see if he is available or not. Have we got Tobias there? We have got Tobias. Excellent. Because I think Tobias has just been to Odessa, and we had the supposed deal struck between Ukraine and Russia to allow the grain exports to come out of Odessa. But unfortunately then, just yesterday, we had missile strikes in Odessa. So Tobias, good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining me at such short notice to talk about this issue, because there was sort of hope 2 or 3 days ago with this grain deal, which may have already, within just a matter of hours and days, have been shattered. And you, I think, have just been to Odessa.
Well, firstly, thank you for inviting me on. And speaking about this, I'm astonished this is not getting greater coverage, given the importance of what's going on in Ukraine. Odessa is ground zero when it comes to exporting grain. It's not getting out because of the conflict, and it affects not only just the Ukrainian economy, the war, it also impacts on African countries across the world because of the scale of grain that actually comes out of the Black Sea, particularly Odessa. There are actually 3 ports in the Odessa region that are affected. And it also impacts on the cost of living crisis here in the UK. The reason why food prices have gone up is because of the increase in grain prices. So well done for covering this. There's, in visiting the country, this huge appreciation for the British efforts. No doubt about that. That's taken for as read. But there's massive disappointment in the international community not doing more. Ukraine is essentially fighting Europe's war for us. And in relation to the actual grain exports itself, I'm baffled that the UK, the US, indeed the United Nations weren't anywhere near backing that deal that you just touched on in Turkey. Of course, the Russian proposal was always going to be on their terms to open the port. So in my view, they could actually see Odessa and Ukraine weaken their defenses so Russia could eventually attack it. It's just baffling that we actually went along with this, given the ceasefires, the promises, the false, errands that we've gone down with, with attacks on civilians, even that original claim that there was no plans to invade Ukraine in the first place. So why do we believe Russia?
Right. So in a sense, you never believed that that they were genuine in this deal, and so you're not surprised within days they've already started sending missiles into Odessa.
Yes, I don't understand why we even went along with the idea that Russia would control the agenda. If we want to make sure that Odessa is able to get that grain out, then as I've been proposing when I was there in Odessa, we need the UN General Assembly to mandate a resolution to actually task Odessa to become an international humanitarian safe haven with safe passage to the Bosphorus Straits through the Turkey back in, so that they get connecting the Black Sea to the Mediterranean and the wider world. This is what Britain could do. This is what we are, I think is part of our resolve, if you like, as being a permanent member of the United Nations. And this is what the international community could do as well, to essentially remove Odessa from the war, get that grain out. But it would require a coalition of the willing to stand up to Putin. But once again, Putin is calling the shots. We are following the agenda. The bully is winning.
And so how would that actually, to do that, Tobias, I mean, would that mean, for example, a no-fly zone over Odessa or additional equipment to shoot down? I think I read, which may or may not have been correct, there were 4 missiles sent over and two were intercepted and 2 actually landed.
Yeah, I mean, for the moment, both Ukrainians and indeed other nations in the Black Sea there are able to fairly protect their airspace, as you've just touched on. But most importantly, you need the legal top cover to then be able to send in a coalition of the willing that would not be on either sides here, because the port of Ukraine would have to be demilitarized. You're effectively taking the Odessa port, out of the war itself. So you'd have a peacekeeping mission, a UN-led mission that would be able to then escort the cargo containers, the ships, to make sure that we can start feeding the world.
I guess, does that just come back to the same point? That would require a Russian agreement, otherwise you've got the UN involved in the war, and then you've got to trust that they'll stick to that agreement.
You have indeed, and it will be looking Russia in the eye and saying, we're going to do this. At the moment, there is the opportunity to do it because Odessa is still in Ukrainian hands. It controls its territorial waters because it's mined them. It needs access to international waters. And I say to the international community, if we don't do this, we will have far bigger problems on our hands when there's starvation in Egypt, in Lebanon, in Somalia, in Yemen, and elsewhere. And the cost of living crisis continues to climb, which will affect, of course,
and
not
Tobias,
just Europe, but
just finally, the mined waters, how difficult is it to navigate through those or around those, or to, essentially to deal with that challenge?
Yes, they would have to be. You'd have to have a demining program as well. There needs to be. It needs to be a long-term proposal here. But this is what the international community could do if it wanted to lean into this. We have demining capabilities ourselves. Britain could do this. The Ukrainians actually know where their mines are. The problem is that you need to clear the waters because there are floating debris and other mines that Russians have placed there too. It is a big challenge, but at the moment we're not doing enough. We're allowing Russia once again to set the agenda, and we are following suit. And the situation is progressively getting worse. And I make the prediction here that if we do not step forward, then once Russia has consolidated its strength in the Donbass area, it will head westwards and take Odessa.
Right. Well, Tobias, thank you so much for those thoughts on that. That's Tobias Ellwood, the Conservative MP for Bournemouth and Chairman of the Defence Select Committee, with real concerns about what's still going on in Odessa, missiles still landing there despite this supposed new deal. Stay with us. We've got lots more coming up. We'll take your messages, your tweets and your calls. And we're also going to be talking about what's going on in Dover and the various ports with Mark Simmons, the Director of Policy at the British Port Agencies. Don't go anywhere. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV.
What was my biggest career moment? After spending about 25 years in Fleet Street, there's loads of stories I could tell you. But actually, I think I did an overnight show for Talk Radio in the early days, the night of the Brexit referendum. And that was actually quite a milestone because, of course, we started off thinking that Remain had won. And at 2:30, 3:15, after Nigel Farage had already said he'd lost, it turned out he hadn't lost. And it turned out we were leaving the European Union. So that was quite shocking.
This is Talk TV News.
Good afternoon, I'm Nadira Tudor. The Port of Dover says it's currently taking around 60 minutes to clear security checks for travel to France. Traffic levels appear to be back to normal after 2 days of severe delays on surrounding roads and queues of up to 7 hours yesterday. Meanwhile, Eurotunnel have warned of a delay service at Folkestone. Travel expert Simon Calder says the extra border checks required because of Brexit are slowing things down.
Once the deal was negotiated, we said we want to be third country citizens, therefore we want an external EU border, and we want to have all our passport stamps. And the rough estimate is that it takes about 3 times longer to process a carload of people.
Police are appealing for videos and pictures after a 28-year-old man died in a shooting at a gathering in East London. Detectives say they would believe there were between 50 and 100 people in and around Cheney Road Park at the time of the incident. Health officials in the UK are urging people not to panic after the World Health Organization declared monkeypox a global emergency, the highest alert that can be issued. There are now around 16,000 cases reported worldwide. A state of emergency has been declared in parts of California as a wildfire continues to rapidly spread near Yosemite National Park. The Oak Fire, as it's been named, has continued to grow in size since starting on Friday. More than 6,000 people have been evacuated and 10 homes destroyed. And Girls Aloud reunited today for the first time in 9 years to honour their late band member Sarah Harding. Nicola Roberts, Cheryl Tweedy and Nadine Coyle took part in a special 5K event to celebrate her life and raise money for breast cancer. The much-loved singer died aged 39 in September last year. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back to Tice Talk. I can't believe it. Time has flown. We're into the last half hour of the show before the amazing Trisha Goddard joins us at 1 o'clock and takes you through until 4. Well, there's been lots of news about the chaos down at Dover with the ports, and everybody's playing the blame game. The Ramonas are blaming Brexit. Some people are blaming the French and the border controls. Who knows? What I have known is that I've had a tweet here from Sam who says, went to Gran Canaria recently, they're looking at passports and stamping in them, taking 3 times longer. Oh, please, Sam goes, was just as quick in Las Palmas as before. Sam says, ask the question, maybe the French are just being deliberately slow. Who knows? Well, someone who may know is my next guest, who's the Director of Policy and External Affairs at the British Ports Agency, Mark Simmons, a man who must know exactly what is going on. Mark, thanks for joining me on Tice Talk this afternoon. Really appreciate it. So, obviously, it's been a horrendous couple of days down in Dover. Some really difficult scenes down there. Seems to be easing a bit now. What's the truth about the issue of what's really gone on? As I understood, that actually they had increased the number of booths, passport booths, up to, I think, 10. But that they just weren't being manned. Is that your understanding?
Yes, that's right, Richard, and good afternoon. Yeah, that is my understanding. The Port of Dover has increased the number of passport booths to process passengers at the Port of Dover recently. And my understanding was that they've been working very closely with the French authorities who staff those booths, because Dover, of course, is rather peculiar in that they have French border controls in their port rather than on the other side, as with other ports. And they've been working very closely with the French authorities to make sure that they understood that this was this was going to be an exceptionally busy time. There would be a big spike in travellers, and that those booths would be staffed by French officials. And so it was very disappointing that on Friday, only around half of them were in fact staffed, causing a huge congestion.
So in a sense, so that's a staffing issue, and then there's the issue of actually what checks they need to do post Brexit, given the fact that we were outside the Schengen area even when we were a member of the EU, but also what discretion at times of extreme pressure they have anyway to ease and speed the process.
Well, very little discretion, it seems, for the EU's external border. You're right, that border in Dover is a Schengen border. So there are necessary checks for passports. They do need to be stamped. And in future, there may be more onerous checks coming down the track with the new visa waiver system, which may require people to register when they get to the port and then enter biometric data and get out of their vehicles, which would, of course, be a huge challenge, and is something that I think the Port of Dover is very keen to avoid. I think one of the problems, Richard, is that a lot of checks on passengers are designed with airports in mind, and they're designed for people moving on foot. And when you put people into cars and have to move them through passport booths, it doesn't always work in the same way and can take longer. And then even if you're just adding a few seconds at somewhere like Dover and you've got 10,000 vehicles coming, that can add up to quite significant delays.
But as I understand, some of the checks being talked about, where they sort of check that you've got a return ticket, that you're not going to work in the EU area, and, you know, you don't have to check everybody. If you've got a couple with a couple of kids in the back, I mean, I've understood there is some discretion around those issues.
I believe so, but unfortunately that's outside of the control of the port when the whether it's Dover or others where you've got UK border.
And talk about what is going on in some of the other ports at Southampton, Portsmouth, Felixstowe. What's going on there where the French border police are, you know, what checks they're carrying out there?
So the Dover is the only port in the UK with French immigration controls on this side. So that's why, that's one of the reasons why there's the disruption has been confined to Dover, as well as the significant. You know, Dover is significantly bigger in terms of passenger flows than most other ferry ports. So,
but have there been delays on the French side from Southampton to Le Havre or Caen or wherever?
No, not that I'm aware of. So, but one of the other issues in Dover is the space, of course. So they've expanded the number of booths, but there is just very little space and small problems. And we've seen this in the past, pre-Brexit, post-Brexit, that small problems on either side of the channel can cause disruption quite quickly. And it's taken the authorities, both at the port and the French authorities, 2 days to clear a backlog that resulted from essentially 5 people not turning up to work. But there isn't any major disruption at any other ferry ports,
right? Which seems to highlight it's the staffing issue. And let's just focus before we finish, Mark, on the changes coming in over the next 12 months, because there's a new thing, isn't there? Called ETIAS, which I think stands for European Travel Information Authorization System. What does that mean, and is that going to help or hinder the process even more, in your view?
It could go either way. So the way it currently is designed, it would significantly hinder. So this is the visa waiver, and that will involve an entry-exit system, this is what I was talking about, when passengers will have to register at the port and then have their biometrics taken on entry into the EU. And so, as it stands, that would, again, it's been designed really for airports, and it would involve people having to get out their cars, having to register when they get to the port. If what the Port of Dover are asking for, if the changes are made, it could actually be a quicker system, replacing passport stamps with biometric checks if it's designed in the right way. Right,
because with this ETIAS system, which is a bit like the US ESTA system, surely that... and you sort of basically sign up online, as I understand, and then that just links into your passport. That should speed things up, shouldn't it?
It could do. I think what the Port of Dover are hoping, and what the UK government are hoping, is that you will be able to put those details in before you travel, so you do your pre-registration rather than doing it on arrival. And then the biometric system is set up in such a way that you're not going to have to get out of your car. Or vehicle, because that would be a real issue. Yeah, sorry.
Clearly, that would be a huge issue if you've got to do that. But those biometric details, I mean, that could all be done as a one-off online, couldn't it?
We hope so, yeah, and that's certainly what the Port of Dover is asking the UK government to ask for from the EU in making sure that those checks are suitable for ferry ports and passengers in cars. And in fact, that could end up speeding up the process, but we'll see. We're not expecting that till next year at the earliest.
OK, Barry, well, lots to keep an eye on there. Thank you, Mark. And you'll enjoy this, Mark, a message we've just had from Barry, who's tweeted in the issues at Dover, highlights the benefits of holidays in the UK. So Talk TV should do segments on various holiday destinations in the UK. And maybe we'll get Simon Calder on to talk about that. Great message there from Barry. Thanks for that. Lots of messages coming in about the segment we had on climate change. Pablo says in 1540 in Italy they had a drought of 5 months, a deadly heat wave occurred and the forests erupted inflamed. In a sense, the climate always changes, and we've always had these issues, but the data shows that actually extreme weather events are causing far fewer deaths now than 50 or 100 years ago, and that's a good thing. Stay with us, we'll take your calls before we finish up. It's Tice Talk. It is, of course, Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk. We're into the last segment, and I have to say I'm chuckling at some of the tweets coming in. They're absolutely fantastic. One here from Christine says, shame the French border control are not doing as good a job with the illegal migrants as with holidaymakers. Jan says something similar. Lots of people with some great comments on there. And another interesting tweet that's just come in on the issue of climate change from Rob, who says, except climate is changing, man's a contributory factor. Population growth, of course, has been significant over the centuries, from 1 billion about 200 years ago now to, I think we're about almost 8 billion. But the reality is, of course, with technology and with our intelligence, we've been able to we're much more efficient at growing food, higher agricultural yields and things. And because, of course, of using fossil fuels, we've had cheap energy, and therefore people are leading longer lives. Well, I think that's a good thing. And I think that man will always be smart and will always use technology to adapt. And isn't it a good thing if we're leading longer, happier lives? I think that's a positive thing. Anyway, Let's see what Les thinks in Sutton Coldfield. Good afternoon, Les.
Good afternoon, Richard. Great show, and I enjoyed your sermon this morning.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
You were spot on with the economy. We've got to boost the economy, not.
Of course we have. We've got to grow out of your crisis. Yeah.
Yeah, increase the tax threshold. But one of the things I wanted to say was in relation to the green levy on the
energy bills. Yes,
that would save us 30 pence per litre straight away, and we could postpone it. I mean, this rush when everyone was encouraged to use diesel cars, and now we've got 8 years to convert all our cars to petrol or hybrid. It's crazy.
Well, that's right. So just to clarify, my understanding is that as of 2030, they're not allowed to sell any more petrol or diesel cars, is my understanding. And it does feel to me that, well, I know the system is not ready for it in terms of the grid, in terms of the demand on electric capacity. And, of course, maybe that's one of the reasons why the price of second-hand cars is so high.
That's right. It's not going to happen in 2030, as everybody knows. And I think what we need to do is realise that. Let's just get the economy moving, first of all. But there's another thing I want to just talk about very quickly. You talked about hotels with illegal immigrants in them. In the leafy suburbs of Sutton Coldfield, and I won't name the hotel because the staff are really good and they've been good to us. We had a conference booked there next year, and they've had to, in 2023, they've had to give us our sort of deposit back because they can't hold it because of these people.
Wow.
But the other thing, which is my bugbear, is HS2.
Oh, yes.
HS2 started off at 55 billion, went to 80 billion, then 120 billion, still going up. And with the technology, as you just mentioned, and in your advert in the break, people aren't going to travel on it. They're not going to travel on it.
Well, that's right. And you're so right, Les, and it's even worse than that. They've actually started sort of lopping off bits of HS2, some of the sort of the branch lines, in order to try and artificially bring the cost back to the sort of levels that they hope it might be, thinking that we're so stupid we may not notice.
No, it's not going to happen. It's going to go up. But what they should do is stop it now, don't go any further north than Birmingham, and then put the cross line from Liverpool right across to Leeds.
You're absolutely right. But to be honest, you know, in business, the first loss is the best loss. I would stop it now. I wouldn't even take it to Birmingham. I mean, you've already got a very fast line from Birmingham to London.
Well, I can get on at Birmingham International, and I can be in London in 1 hour 14 minutes on the Pendolino. How much faster do we want to go?
Well, and guess what? On that 1 hour 14 minutes, you can do some work if you want to.
You can indeed. But just one other thing which really, really annoys me.
Just quickly, Les.
The immigration. I've just been listening to some of the discussions there. We pay just over £1 billion per year for the 50 million people in the hotels, and this is one just there, £1 billion. And that's got to be stopped.
The overall cost is it's many billions. It's not just the hotels, so many other related costs to it, and that needs to be broken. It's funny, isn't it, that the government seems very reluctant to give us the true overall cost. Les, thank you so much for your thoughts from Sutton Coldfield, which was great. We're going to quickly head up to York, where Mike's on the line. Hi, Mike. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Richard. How are you?
I'm all right. What's on your mind?
Well, there's two things, really. First of all, Dover. Wasn't we supposed to have Ramsgate to ease the disruption and the congestion at Dover? Or have they built it yet, or have they just wasted all those millions of pounds?
Great question. I don't know the answer to that, but I know Ramsgate Port is there, but I don't know what facilities it's got.
It's a scandal. Anyway, but my point was Rishi Sunak, as a pensioner, he became the Chancellor in 2020, and in 2021 he suspended the triple lock. Which of those MPs that are supporting him don't mind persecuting the elderly? And can I also say that 10% of a pension, the state pension, is £18 a week. £18 a week, that's what it represents, 10%.
Yes, but I think, am I right in saying that they've committed to reinstate the triple lock? But perhaps you might remind us from when?
Next year. The thing is, if you promise the triple lock will stay there in the election promise, and then you take it away, OK, he said he's going to keep it and we're going to have it back in 2023. Well, hang on a minute. They've already taken a lot of... Will that 10% take into account what he's already taken from the elderly? Or do we just continue paying for NHS treatment? Do we also keep having to surrender our houses for retirement care? It seems as though all these MPs, these Tory MPs, really do persecute the elderly and see us as cash cows with the only solution that they've got for us.
It's promises that they make, and there's so many of them, that they then don't keep. And, of course, they froze the threshold so that everybody on any income, unless you're on benefits, is actually worse off, aren't they, Mike?
Apart from the fact that in Scotland, it don't work like that. In Wales, you get your bus pass when you're 60, as in Wales and Ireland. We have to pay for everything. And the fact is, where I live, anyway, there's no buses. So bus pass is no good anyway.
No.
We need cars, and the fuel's so expensive.
Well, that's why we've got to cut the fuel duty. You're quite right, Mike. Thank you so much indeed. I'm just going to try and squeeze in one more call. That was Mike in York with his concerns about government breaking their promises yet again. From York down to Kent, Steve's on the line. Hi, Steve.
Oh, hi, Richard. This Brexit, this customs
the border issue at Dover, is that it?
Yeah. Now I can remember going back 20 or 30 years, and before they lifted passport controls, we had to show passports all that time ago, and it was very straightforward, very quick and easy. So this is just a prefabricated thing by the French. It's a Brexit punishment.
I think you're so right, Steve.
Yeah, because I used to go every week over to Belgium via Calais, and sometimes there wasn't even any French in the control booths checking the passports. You know, you could just drive straight through. They weren't interested. Right, it was pre the borders going up, so we had to still show our passports. But like I say, we used to drive through. There was one or two there. They couldn't be bothered. They didn't check the passports properly. They just give you just a glance. I think
that's right. And
waved you through. And now, all of a sudden, they're right on us. They're on our case. They're checking everything to the letter. It's all down to the European Union saying we want to punish the Brits. And sorry, Richard. Just one more quick point. The French used to be in France checking the passports, and then they moved them to Dover.
Yes, and that was part of the... that's just in Dover. That was to try and to smooth the process.
It did. It did when we were in the European Union, but now it doesn't make any sense. So we should move the French back to France, and then they'd have the problem of boats queuing up in Calais, and they'll have the problem. So we could still go through the Dover port fairly quickly, and then it would be the French problem then, because we would then be in France, the boats would be queuing up. You see where I'm coming from?
Completely, Steve. And interestingly, Mark Simmons just on earlier, he was saying that in some of the other ports, the checks are actually done on the French side. So that's a good point. I actually wonder why can't the checks be done during the crossing on the ferries themselves, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I understand. It's almost like things have got worse.
Without question.
Since the European Union.
There's no question at all.
Finding obstacles. It's really sad. Brexit could have worked so well.
Well, as you say, Steve, they're trying to punish us.
The punishments are coming in, and we've got to find ways
we'll keep battling, Steve. We will keep battling to deal with that. That is for sure. Steve, I've got to go because I've got...
you're closing. What about getting other ports in Belgium and other places to try and get faster routes, new routes where we could bypass Calais?
It's a good point. It's a good point, Steve. I've got to shoot.
Not to slow us down.
I've got to shoot, Steve. But thank you very much indeed. That's Steve there making some positive suggestions, concerns about being punished by our friends the French. There we go. So many tweets and messages coming in. Thank you for all of those. And thank you to my wonderful production team for looking after me, keeping me on the straight and narrow. And talking of the straight and narrow, let's go to Trisha Goddard, who is going to entertain you all for the next 3 hours. Good afternoon, Trisha. What's going on?
Good afternoon. Of course, did you know that once upon a time I was a hovercraft hostess?
I didn't. Wow, so you know it all.
I actually do know a lot. So trust me, you might not want to hear it.
Oh, I think people do. I think you've got to let people know some examples during your show. Maybe not.
It's been going on for a very long time.
Go for it, Trish, quickly.
All right, so quickly, we are asking about snobbishness, snobbery, because it's been suggested that it should be outlawed or criminalised, and we're asking if people think they're middle class for